Just at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The Teamsters Union and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York filed an application with Chief Judge Loretta Preska requesting that she approve an agreement to end decades of government oversight over the Teamsters Union.
International Brotherhood of Teamsters President Jim Hoffa. Hoffa says this agreement with the government signals success in organized crime corruption from the Teamsters, and he expects the judge to approve it.
We anticipate that she'll approve that agreement. This is a historic day for our Teamsters. After decades of hard work and millions of dollars spent, we can finally say that corruption from the Teamsters.
On the Kaiser Permanente strike line in West Los Angeles, National Healthcare Workers striker Elizabeth White says that patients' needs and adequate staff to meet those needs is what this strike is all about. For the working class communities she serves, the top concerns are youth safety, mental health services, and community.
Patient who has Kaiser Permanente as their health insurance plan, when their family is in need, when their family faces mental, emotional problems, or violence in their community, they expect the product that they purchased to have all the components in the box. They expect their health plan to provide them with an appropriate intervention based on behavioral sciences.
Instead, White says Kaiser is squeezing services by failing to provide adequate professional staffing to meet the community needs. White says an upcoming two-day strike by 18,000 union nurses is centered on the same staffing issue at Kaiser.
We very much share the same philosophy with the nurses in the sense that we think Kaiser is really not giving safe staffing and nurses protection under the Ebola crisis.
Over 100 people packed a hearing and another room at the Wisconsin State Capitol Wednesday to weigh in on the Assembly's School Accountability Bill. WIN's Zoe Sullivan reports.
The controversial bill was presented last week by Education Committee Chair Representative Teasfeld. The bill lays out a mandate for public schools that receive a failing grade for 4 consecutive years to convert to a charter format. Milwaukee's Democratic Representative Christine Sinicki took the chair to task for the bill's potentially devastating impact on the state's education budget. Rachel Schleuder has been teaching in the Milwaukee public school system for 25 years. While she agrees that accountability is essential, she says the legislature has to do a better job.
This is very important to our children. We have so many children in MPS that need that community-based school. And we've seen so many voucher schools up and leave in the middle of the night. We had a high school that actually left around 200 students without a school. Their parents had to look for an alternative right after vacation.
Schleuder also described the way that broader social problems such as poverty, violence, and inequality affect children's performance in school, issues that bills such as the one on the table do not address.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. Pensions, front and foremost after yesterday's Auditor General report. What's going on with our pension situation? And is this years of I didn't raise taxes and we're just going to kick the can down the road? Is this the Bush collapse? Is this privatization run amok? We will find out. Also going to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement ahead of the President's State of the Union address, which is coming up, I guess, next Tuesday evening. Tuesday should be an interesting day anyway, with the inauguration here on the state level and the President's State of the Union. Should be at least an interesting night for discussions one way or the other. Also going to talk about being happy. This idea that, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. One of those things that if you go back and you read about why that was there, Jefferson chose that word specifically instead of property because happiness at the time, something that they thought, life is about more than just pounding your head against the pavement. There should be some gratification. So we're going to talk about what makes workers happy. And especially in light of the recent report that says being a union member actually makes people happy. Something I fully attest to. So lots of that, the trade, the collective bargaining, all kinds of stuff to talk about today. But first, I got a bunch of emails from folks, on yesterday's conversation about the homeless gentleman I encountered, and I've been fixated on this. I'm really stuck on this, and I'm trying to figure out where to go and what to do next, because this is something that I got to be honest, as a society, is enraging. And for those who weren't here yesterday, on Tuesday I had a whole slew of meetings set up. There were one right after the other, after another, and none of them went well. It was one of those days in doing this job that I just go, there's got to be something easier. And as I was walking out of one meeting, I was heading down this alley, and my head's in the clouds. I'm not really there, which, to be honest, is not really a safe kind of mental status. Walking down an isolated alley in the middle of Harrisburg. But this guy approaches me, and probably about 10 years younger than I am, and you can tell that the guy's on hard times. He's disheveled, his clothes are dirty, he's got all kinds of layers on, and he starts off, I'm homeless. Can I ask for a couple of dollars, and kind of giving the spiel. And generally when people do that, I'll stop and I'll go, tell me your story. How'd you get here? What's because I want to know. And, it turns out lost his job, ended up losing his apartment, doesn't have much family in the neighborhood, doesn't have any family. And what he did have was a girlfriend, and they split. And, here he is with no one to fall back on, no safety net for him to speak of, and homeless. And he said that, the day before he had been across town trying to find work. And by the time he got back to the mission, and this could be, it could be true, could be not, I don't know, but it sounds plausible. He was on the other side of time, didn't get back in time to get into the shelter at the mission, because I know they have you have to be in at a certain time, and you can't stay there all day because they want you out mulling around in the streets. I guess the theory is you'll go looking for a job and be on the other side of town and not get back in time. I don't know. But, he opened up his hands, and all of his fingers were frostbitten. I mean, big open wounds. To where, it looked nasty. I mean, I've seen a lot of things, and I was like, wow, what did you do? And it was just a matter of, the gloves he had weren't sufficient. He spent the night in the most frigid of cold, and, had nowhere to go. And I'm thinking about this, I've never been in that position to where I've never had somewhere to go, to where I couldn't walk into a store. I couldn't walk in and sit down and buy a cup of coffee or something just to warm up. I've never been in that position. So I've been, just mentally stuck in this place where here's this guy who, didn't look like an alcoholic, didn't look like a drug addict, just looked like a guy who fell on hard times. And I've, my wife and I were talking today, and, they could be our kids, could be my son, could be one of my daughters. What happens to them if we go? There's no family in the neighborhood. There's no family here for them to fall back on. And, I just couldn't get it out of my head. And it brought me back to, our government, what our government is supposed to do, what we want done that we can't individually do ourselves. I mean, I look at this and honestly and truthfully, there's nothing any one of us could do to change this person's life. I gave him the 10 or 12 bucks I had in my pocket, but that, just enough to maybe get a meal, if that. It's not going to change his life significantly. It's not going to find him shelter for the night or for the next week or for the next month. And, my wife and I were talking about, there are a number of states around the country that they're taking these kind of things and they're building infrastructure to where people at least have somewhere to go. And not shelters where we warehouse people in rows of cots, but actually have some structure that is theirs, an address that is theirs. And my wife said, why don't we take some of these abandoned buildings, some of these abandoned apartment buildings, hotels, and turn them into no-cost housing? Now, my wife is not a socialist, but it sounded like a very socialist idea, this idea that, maybe just a thought. And if you have to think about it from just purely an economic standpoint, think about the costs of this guy who now has 10 frostbitten fingers. The cost of him going to the hospital and getting the care and then kicked back to the curb with just an extra Band-Aid. And like my wife said, what happens when they get infected? He's going to go back. And who covers that? We do. I mean, at some point, we've gotten to this angry kind of retribution and punishment position in this country where we've stopped thinking. I mean, getting this guy a room for a night, a week, a month is obviously less costly than a hospital visit or several hospital visits, especially with somebody who's probably going to lose all of his fingertips. And the best my wife's like, the best he could probably hope for is to get arrested. And then I said, well, if we're going to arrest him and put him in jail, why not put him in a hotel? The guy was not and I guess the reason I bring this up is, what does it say about us? What does it say about us as a society? And then, what if it was us? My mother always said, as for the grace of God, there go I. That at any time, that could be me, that could be you, that could be my kids. And, as we move into the next phase of Pennsylvania governance, if you will, with a solid, massive Republican and a really, in my view, a very far out right-wing corporate conservative ideological party controlling things, and a fairly liberal governor, how do we address these problems? When you have the party of, well, he's just pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Well, you know what? With no fingers and no straps, what do you do? So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes in the coming days, weeks, and months. But I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call here at the program. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. I'm fixated on it, and it's one of those struggles that I'm going to figure out which way we go on this. But I just can't let it go. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Auditor General Eugene DePasquale about yesterday's press conference and the report that was. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You know eternity can't ever change your mind.
just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. This date marked one of the strangest industrial disasters in U.S. history. It started out as a cold, wintry day in Boston, when the weather suddenly shifted, and temperatures began to dramatically rise. A 50-foot storage container containing nearly 2.5 million gallons of molasses began to make strange noises. At the time, molasses was popular as a sweetener, and also was used in the production of alcoholic beverages. However, the nation was on the brink of prohibition. This decision proved fatal. The poorly constructed tank ruptured, sending a 25-foot wall of molasses into the streets. The sticky tidal wave of molasses filled the streets, knocking over buildings, killing 21 people and injuring 150 more. A fireman was among those who lost their lives. The property damage totaled more than $1 million. Cleanup was a long, messy affair. The Boston Harbor remained a tinged brown with molasses into the summer months. The owners of the tank blamed the disaster on an explosion by anarchists. After many years of litigation, the courts found the owners had not tested the tank properly in their rush to beat prohibition. In a class action lawsuit, the company was held responsible for manslaughter. They had to pay more than $600,000 in damages. And today, on hot summer days, nearly 100 years later, Bostonians in the area claim they can still smell the molasses rising from the streets. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. On Fox News' The Kelly File, guest Brigitte Gabriel, who founded an organization which, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, tapped into a groundswell of anti-Muslim rage and did what it could to fan the flames, revived the conservative myth that President Obama is a Muslim as a way to attack the president's anti-terrorism policies.
Well, President Obama has systematically, since he came into office, avoided calling anything relating to Islam and terrorism together. President Obama is on a mission to protect the image of Islam because he believes that protecting the image of Islam is very important to him because he was born into the Muslim faith, raised by a devout Muslim father in an Islamic country. He's more concerned about protecting the image of Islam than protecting the people of the United States.
This is far from the first time Fox has tried this trick. Fox News has consistently fed the myth that Obama is a Muslim and cast doubt on his Christianity. Notably, Fox promoted the smear that Obama attended a madrasa, a Muslim school, when he was a boy. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need. Because he's racing.
And welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. You know, yesterday we talked about the pension situation as the Auditor General's office held a press conference about, you know, the crisis or the potential crisis in the municipal pension system. We've heard an awful lot about the state pensions, but you know, you look at the municipal level, that next step down, there's some problems there too. And my position on it has been, look, for too long we've been having politicians running on, I'm not raising your taxes. Granted, I'm not paying the bills either. And this is what partially has caused this crisis, at least my thought on it, which is why we've asked the Auditor General here in Pennsylvania to come on the program, Eugene D. Pasquale. Thanks for taking time for us.
Always pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So I look at this, and on the municipal level, you're saying we're $7.7 billion in the hole, or we've got this liability of $7.7 billion. Why is the money not there?
A couple reasons. Number one, and it's $7.7 billion total in Pennsylvania. So that's adding up all the unfunded liability that exists across all of our municipalities, which includes 3 different types of pension plans: police, fire, and non-uniform. A couple reasons why. Number one is cities, for many instances, didn't put enough money into the system. Number two, I think it is a way too burdensome, cumbersome system where money managers weren't held appropriately accountable. And number three, a lot of municipalities, again, over the course of time, not necessarily this year, but over the course of time, projected overly optimistic rates of return, which allowed them to, in a sense, not put money in. And so every time that would happen and they didn't put enough money in, it only compounded the problem moving forward. So, and then you had certainly the stock market, hit of 2001, and then certainly the collapse in 2008 that certainly exacerbated the problem.
Let me ask you this: how much of this is, the especially we get that there was the Bush collapse in 2008, obviously that, and the not funding part of it, obviously that. But how much of it also is this attack on the public sector and all of the privatization that's gone on? I know Governor Corbett ran around during the campaign saying, Pennsylvania's government's smaller than it's ever been because they got rid of a bunch of people, some 20,000 teachers and education professionals. How much of it is that as well?
I don't know how you can blame the rank and file worker for this problem. I mean, if the elected officials didn't do a good job in managing the system, I don't know how you can blame the rank and file worker. There is one piece that I do think, that at least on the municipal side is, open to reform, and sort of then trying to have a fair and balanced solution, is that we do have this issue called spiking, where people in the last 2 to 3 years of their working years can put in a host of overtime and make their highest average salary artificially higher than it should have been, which increases their pension. I think that's one area that on the worker side we can address, which is common sense and goes against and without violating the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish here, and having an effective pension system. But beyond that, but even that, they're still playing by the rules. But I think that's a rule change that can and should happen. But beyond that, look, a lot of people say they're pro-cop and pro-firefighter. So I don't know how you can say that and blame them at the same time for pensions not being funded.
Well, I don't blame the worker for putting in overtime. I think that's a management problem, and I think it's an employment problem, because I got to be honest, I don't think anybody should be working overtime. If you've got people working that kind of overtime, you should be hiring more people to fill those positions.
Well, and you bring up certainly another interesting part of this, and that is I'm looking at it from the pension side, but there's no question that people are putting in that kind of overtime, assuming they're doing real work, that means you probably didn't have enough people to begin with.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming they are, unless management is that inept, and I hope that's not the case.
And again, let's play it like in the optimistic part, which is they're doing real work. That means they don't have enough people. If they're not doing real work, and again, I would highly doubt that, but hypothetically there was, that's also a management issue as well.
Right. So let me ask you this, and then one of the things that also came out of your report that's just kind of shocking to me is that there are, you said, 1,223 municipal plans that are individually administered. To me, that sounds idiotic. That sounds like we're paying 1,223 different agencies to handle that bit of money. That seems like something that you could put into maybe one pot.
Welcome to Pennsylvania. It's insane. I mean, it's just point blank insane. I've actually advocated for 3, because I do think when you're dealing with cops and firefighters in non-uniform, especially when it comes to years of service and what time cops retire and firefighters versus non-uniform. So, but having said that, I think there should at least be one for each of those categories. But there's no question that you have some municipalities that have literally like a handful of retirees and one employee. Well, of course that's going to be messed up.
Because it seems to me that, and it goes back to, what they want to do on the state level, given everyone these crummy 401k plans. And in my view, simply to be able to bilk each individual member, and pay those fees that are just killing the 401k plans. It just seems like that's kind of the setup.
And even I tell some of my friends that, and some of them aren't my friends, that support that approach. I said, even if you think that is a good idea, you are making the current unfunded liability even worse, because another aspect of this is, as cities have become, either through demographic changes with less population or simply through technology, having less people as part of the workforce, if you pull people out of the system and put them into 401ks, that only will exacerbate the unfunded liability, because there's less people then paying in.
Yeah, I mean, and you take that to the state level as well. And I remember that I sat in on one of the meetings, one of the hearings they had, where they brought a guy in from the American Enterprise Institute who even admitted it, that moving from the defined benefit plan to a 401k type defined contribution plan would be much more costly. But his rationale for doing it was the right thing to do.
Look, I guess everyone has their own definition of right thing to do, but explain that to all the other cuts you'd have to have in public safety and across the state that would impact real lives for the next 2 decades just to try to accomplish that. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I in my opinion, that's going to that approach is a non-starter. Even if you thought of it was the right thing ideologically, it just doesn't make financial sense for the state.
Now, you've said that something like 47% of the municipalities are in some form of trouble, which means more than half are in good shape. Of those that are in trouble, how many are in really bad trouble?
You're probably talking about about 20% are in really bad trouble. I mean, for instance, the city of Scranton. I think we're being optimistic when we say this, that within 4 years, without a change, they're looking at bankruptcy.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's really bad. And that's obviously a major city in Pennsylvania. So that is of our big cities. That's the first one to hit. They barely have enough money to make their pension payments and their fire pension for the next 2 years. So that's the one to watch. So they're the tip of the iceberg, and if nothing is done by then, I think you're going to start to see an avalanche by this. So we got about 2 years before Scranton hits the iceberg, and then from there you'll see an avalanche from there if it's not fixed. But that's the first one. That's the first one.
Is this a city issue? Is this a rural issue? Where do you see? Or is it across the Commonwealth? It doesn't matter. Urban, rural, it doesn't matter. Which
doesn't matter. It's certainly the bigger dollar amounts happen because when you see Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, just because they're bigger cities. But when you look at the percentage, Pittsburgh, which is the second highest amount because of the size of their city and unfunded liability, but they're not actually in the top 25 on a percentage. Philadelphia is. Scranton is actually number 2, but there's a lot of smaller townships and boroughs that are in that top 25 by the percentage of unfunded liability.
So this is everyone. What do you think the appetite in the General Assembly to do something on this level is? I know the grand prize and all of the talk is at the state level.
Right.
What about is there much appetite for this? Because I haven't heard an awful lot.
That's why I did what I did yesterday, because if they don't do this, and what ends up happening in Scranton and other areas takes place, and there's bankruptcy, and then the retirees end up getting 10 cents on the dollar because just have some federal bankruptcy judge just coming in and declaring it. I don't think that's an acceptable outcome. We have elected officials that we can hold responsible during election time, and I'm going to keep shaking the trees because this is an issue that has to be addressed. But you're right. You're right. The appetite, I don't want to be crass about this to say it. If you're starving, but you don't like a certain type of food and it's in front of you and you're starving, you got to eat something, you got to eat it. Sometimes you got to do things that you don't necessarily have the appetite for because it simply has to get done.
Right. And that's the part of governance. And what's frustrating to me, Eugene, is that, ideologically, the people who are in power of our General Assembly, their mentality, as I understand their ideology, is run them through bankruptcy like they've done to corporate America. To me, I've been saying for years that we're going to see what happened in the 80s and 90s in corporate America, where companies took on massive debt, filed bankruptcy, and screwed the workers out of their pensions. I believed we were going to see that on the state level, and this looks like the table has been set.
In my opinion, this is just my opinion, there's no way anybody can say they are pro-cop and pro-firefighter and go in that direction.
I'm with you. Another thing came out today. You have, I wanted to move in another direction.
Sure.
Today you guys issued a press release saying that in Washington, they've issued some Medicaid expansion waivers. And you're saying that's going to harm people here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, basically what happened is Governor Corbett, in the latter part of leading up to the election, was granted waivers. Now, I would say the Department of Public Welfare, which is now the Department of Human Services, followed all the rules of what they had to do. But by granting that waiver for his Healthy PA initiative, instead of waiting to see what the voters said on Election Day, it's now going to lead to massive amount of changes in waste because Governor-elect Wolf, who will soon be Governor Wolf, is going to have a straight Medicaid expansion. All this stuff that's happening in the interceding months is basically putting people into limbo, and it shouldn't have happened. And some people say whether it's Governor Corbett's fault or Governor Wolf's fault. I think Washington should wait to see what the voters had to say before granting the waiver.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and when as the whole healthy PA thing was going on, I'm going, this is going to be one of those parting shots at the door, where the working poor of this Commonwealth are going to suffer. And when I read this, I'm going, right again.
I guarantee you, and this is where, because it's just the nature of things. People that have signed up for this and think they have a health care plan, but as there's a transition, something's going to happen to them. And it's unnecessary. And they tell me that there's some bureaucrat in Washington couldn't wait a couple of weeks before they decided whether to grant the waiver or not to see what the voters said. I find that absurd.
I'm with you. But one of the things that I caught in your release that just stopped me dead in my tracks, and maybe you can address it, is this $47,801,598 in reimbursements. And I looked down, to one of them being almost $1 million in radio and television buys to promote this healthy PAs. And, my thought is this, did we use this for electioneering too? So we've taken money from the working poor of this Commonwealth to buy radio and TV ads.
Is it absurd? Yes. But here's where I want to give a balanced view on this. Literally part of what the feds were telling the department, and by the way, this will blow people away, but the feds were telling the Department of Human Services as they're approaching election day, where the candidate who's going to change all this is likely to win, they're telling them, you've got to start signing up people. It's amazing.
Well, again,
it literally blows me away.
It blows me away as well. But then again, that's another level of politics beyond that, because you got to push. You got to push that. And again, this is where common sense and politics seem to be at odds. Common sense says, look, the guy who brought us healthy PA is not going to be there to enact it. It's going to change. Why waste all this money?
It is, look, I'm just a guy from Pittsburgh who's living in New York and the Auditor General. So take this for what it's worth. But after the election, you think somebody in the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington could have called up and said, look, I think we got to put the brakes on this, because obviously the state's going to be going in a different direction. How that didn't happen, I'll never know the answer to that.
Now, do you see Governor Wolf moving towards full Medicaid expansion? And is there anything the General Assembly can do to stop it?
I believe he is full steam ahead on that. That's my read on things.
Good.
And the legislature may try to pass a bill, but I think my sense is, again, this is not coming direct. I'm just giving you my reading of the tea leaves, that he would veto that in about 7 seconds.
Oh, good. And lots of work to be done. And as January 20th comes and what's to come comes, I think the pension issue is a huge one we will keep on our radar. And I appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate you coming on the program.
Hey, my pleasure, Rick. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Eugene. Auditor General Eugene D. Pasquale. If you want to read the report, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on the Auditor General's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Who does this new Republican Congress work for? Foreign oil companies or the American people?
Keystone XL pipeline clears Nebraska court hurdle, now moves on to the U.S. Senate.
A new study published in the journal Nature argues that most of the remaining fossil fuel reserves on our planet will need to be left in the ground if we want to have any chance of preventing catastrophic climate change.
Researchers warn Canada's tar sands and Arctic oil must remain in the ground.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop.
Fracking country braces for oil bust. Plus,
we're well underway to our final goal, which is to become fossil-free by 2050.
Denmark breaks the world record for wind energy generation.
All of that wind generation and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Lawmakers have hinted they may revisit some of the requirements because businesses have said the regulations are too expensive and over-regulating.
That's odd. Normally, businesses find regulations too cheap and not restrictive enough. Get to work, lawmakers. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you got a lot to get to today, but before you do, I wanted to welcome aboard Green News Report's newest affiliate partner, the Nowman Radio Show with Dan Nicewander on killradio.org. Hey, Dan, welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. Glad to have you.
Okay, now what do you, Desi, have for us today?
Well, first, due to a quirk in state law, a new ruling by the Nebraska State Supreme Court has effectively upheld a new route for the controversial Keystone XL pipeline from Canada.
This is a weird quirk. In Nebraska, at the Supreme Court, apparently, minority rules. 4 out of the 7 Supreme Court justices found the approval process for the Keystone to be unconstitutional, but due to that quirk you're talking about, it requires 5. So even though a majority found it unconstitutional, the pipeline approval process is approved.
The decision clears the way for the federal regulatory process to resume and for President Obama to make a final decision. But Republicans in the Senate aren't waiting for that, introducing new legislation in their new Republican-controlled Senate to bypass the regulatory process and force construction of the controversial pipeline. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, excoriated the legislation.
We have got to cut carbon emissions rather than give a green light for the exploration and the production of some of the dirtiest oil on this planet.
So far, Republicans in Congress do not have the 67 Senate votes needed to overcome a threatened presidential veto.
But they do have about 10 Democrats and 1 independent who are willing to go ahead with this, even though U.S. doesn't really stand to gain. This is just a lobbyist boondoggle. It's amazing to me.
Yep. Meanwhile, a new study finds the tar sands of Canada that would be transported via the pipeline must stay in the ground, and so must all of the oil and gas reserves in the Arctic if the world is to have even a 50-50 chance of avoiding catastrophic global warming. The study in the journal Nature is the first ever to specifically identify exactly which fossil fuel reserves must remain in the ground and where, and that has profound geopolitical and economic implications.
Oh, I'm sure the oil industry and their backers in Congress are now deciding to leave all that oil in the ground after all, based on this new study. Am I right?
Yeah, not so much. Oil prices continue to slide and may be headed as low as $40 a barrel, and that leaves states and towns that rely on the oil industry for revenue to brace for the bust part of the boom and bust cycle as oil and gas companies begin pulling back as oil drilling becomes unprofitable. On NPR, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin hopes it's only temporary.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop in the price of barrel oil, but that's hard to predict. So we're being cautiously optimistic and planning that there might be a potential slump in the economy.
I love these Republican politicians who complain about the price of oil until it actually goes down, and now they're all worried that the price of oil is too low.
Going in the opposite direction is Denmark. Thanks to decades of steady investment, Denmark has broken the world record for wind power generation in 2014, generating 40% of its overall electricity from wind power alone. Denmark's climate minister, Rasmus Petersen, at a recent UN climate event, said it's essential to meeting Denmark's goal of being free of all fossil fuels by 2050.
It's not easy to transform a complex society. It's not easy to find a way in the wilderness. Denmark can arrive at the fossil-free destination by many means and from many directions. And we can do it without jeopardizing the economy.
And they're going to do this by 2050 and get rid of all fossil fuels?
Yep, they are well on their way.
Why can't we do that?
Because we're mired in oil money politics?
Oh, yeah, there's that. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website, please, at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Yes, the mighty winds are blowing across the land and across the sea. It's blowing peace and freedom. It's blowing you and me.
There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Janice sent me an email here during the break saying, Rick, you're spot on. Exactly what the Republicans and the corporatists want to do is to run our state governments through bankruptcy, much like they did with Enron, much like they did with Bethlehem Steel, much like they did with all of the industries that are now gone and the pensions that are gone with them. Again, I think back to some friends of mine who during the 80s and 90s who lost their pensions. I shouldn't say lost. Lost is one of those terms you go, gee, I don't know where it is. We know exactly where those people's pensions are. They're in the pockets of the investor class of this country. A massive, enormous redistribution of wealth. A theft from the working class of this country to line the pockets of the very, very well-to-do. That's it. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And they've already sucked all of the pension money out of the private sector. And now they've softened everything up because the private sector workers are going, hey, I got screwed. Screw them too. So now the table's been set. And they want to do the exact same thing they got away with in the private sector. They want to do it to the public sector. And, you look at the crisis that they've created. It just lines it up. I mean, this looks like, Bain Capital and Mitt Romney all over. You've saddled them with debt. You've created this crisis. You've created this unfunded liability, which, look, at the end of the day, $7.7 billion, a liability sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but not when you're talking about the next 100 years. If you fix this, if you right the ship, and you begin to say, we need to have people paying into it, which means workers. We need to be hiring people. I think that's the way to go. And I'm glad Eugene talked about it there for a second, about the idea of privatization, because, you had part of this, and I've been saying this for a while, part of this, the problem here, much like many of the defined benefit plans that are out there that are struggling. What happened is you had everybody shifting away. You had corporate America moving their employees away from it, going, it's cheaper for us to not pay anything for pensions. That's your problem there, worker. All the while not raising wages. So you want to talk about, over the last 30 years, you've had a decrease in actual wages, but you've also had a massive theft of wages when they've taken away the pensions. I go back to just to use my own personal example from the 1980s. I was working, throwing boxes on a shipping dock. I'm making $15 an hour, getting some healthcare money put in to the fund, getting some pension money put into the fund. Today, doing that job, make $11, $12 an hour doing that job, but there's no healthcare and there's no pension. So not only did you lose $3 an hour in actual wages, you lost another $6 or $7 an hour in benefits. So you're looking at $8 to $10 an hour in pay cut for doing that same job. Where did that money go? And we know where it went. It went to the corporate bottom line. It went to feed the investor class. So they could do what? And this is the best part of this. This is the most insane part of this. They took your money and my money. They took our money collectively, and they built China. They moved all the factories over to China. They moved all of the production out of this country. And, the title that the U.S. held for 100 years as the most productive, the largest producer nation in the world is now gone. We can't produce widgets. and whatnots and ding-dongs and whatever. Unless we give corporate America the ability to automate it, that's how they're bringing manufacturing back. So, I mean, it's like wearing the kick me sign. We funded our own demise by allowing these criminals to steal us and rob us blind, all the while being divided over nonsensical, idiotic social issues like abortion and gay marriage, going, I don't care. You know what I care about? That guy that I met on the street, that's somebody's kid. That could be my kid. He can't get a job. You know, at the end of the day, Ronald Reagan was right. The best anti-poverty program is a job, and a job that pays decent wages. What's frustrating to me is we have so many people going, why should we be paying somebody to push a broom $16 an hour? And I'm of the mindset, why not? This way they get to be able to rent a place to stay, maybe buy a house, support their family. They don't have to take taxpayer dollars and food subsidies and housing and electricity and school lunch or any of that stuff. They're supporting themselves by their work. And the person that hires them is the one that pay it, not the taxpayers who are. Think about what we've allowed to happen over the last 30 years. We've allowed them to offshore most of the middle class and lower middle class jobs. We've allowed them to cut taxes to the point to where the wealthy haven't paid lower taxes pretty much since it was enacted in 1913. And we've had this massive shift in responsibility from the people with the big shoulders to the 98-pound weakling who can't carry a thimble of water, let alone several buckets. I mean, it's pure genius if you're at the top looking down going, look what we have done. But if you're the guy being trickled on, and I would say that yellow stuff that's coming down from the sky, it's not rivers of gold and honey. It's got a salty taste, but it ain't honey. You got to be looking up at that going, you know, how do I allow this? And how do we allow this? By voting for corporate Democrats and conservative Republicans. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Just nuts, which is why we need to be organizing. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Hand in hand, that's the power that must rule in every land. One industrial union.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. A week after the attack against the French newspaper Charlie Hebdo, the Yemeni branch of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has taken credit for the attack, though that claim has yet to be verified by Western intelligence. One of the gunmen in the attack told a TV outlet last week that he was supported by al-Qaeda in Yemen, while another attacker seemed to pledge allegiance to the Islamic State. Whatever their true affiliations were, the French military is being ordered to readjust its offensive posture. President Francois Hollande said today that an aircraft carrier was to be positioned closer to the Middle East and could begin assisting in the coalition fight against the Islamic State in Iraq. So far, France has not indicated it will take the fight to al-Qaeda in Yemen. That task has been primarily left to the United States, which has used drones to take out al-Qaeda figures such as Anwar al-Awlaki in 2011. And the United Nations has kicked off a round of Libyan peace talks in Geneva. It's the latest attempt to bring together parliamentarians, local leaders, and rebel figures to avert a wider civil war in the country. Islamist militias control the capital Tripoli, while what's left of the Libyan parliament has fled to the eastern city of Tobruk, where legislators live and work aboard a Greek car ferry that was rented to house them.
Libya is falling really very deeply in chaos.
The Spanish diplomat Bernardino Leon is mediating the UN talks.
Libya is at the heart of a strategic region, and whatever is affecting Libya is affecting the whole region. It's affecting the Mediterranean, it's affecting the Middle East, it's affecting the Sahel, Europe, so it's really a very serious issue.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Look out, America. Here comes the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Dubbed a corporate coup d'etat by Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, It's a grandiose grab for power, masked as a trade deal, allowing an unprecedented level of global corporate rule over Americans. Let's take a quick look at what we'll be getting into. The trade hoax. Of the document's 29 chapters, only 5 address tariffs and other actual trade matters. The other 24 consist of various ways to free corporations from any accountability and from any responsibility to the world community's common good. Buy American. TPP dictates that all corporations based in any member nation must be given equal access to the public dollars that any government spends on equipment, food, highway projects, etc. Thus, our own national, state, and local governments would no longer be free to give preference to suppliers of our choice. Buy American and Buy Local programs could be challenged by private corporations. Wall Street rides again. If anyone doubts that this pact is a corporate boondoggle dressed in trade clothes, let them read its shameful financial provisions. Too big to fail laws, ensuring that the cost of a bank's collapse would be borne by investors, not taxpayers. Under TPP, giant global banks could scamper into private tribunals to grab billions of our tax dollars if they have to comply with such laws. Also, our nation's financial regulations would have to be harmonized to comply with TPP's extreme deregulation, recreating the anything-goes Wall Street ethic that crashed the world economy in 2008. A Robin Hood tax on volatile, super high-speed speculators? Nope. TPP specifically lets global banks challenge and kill these laws. This is Jim Hightower saying, to stop the TPP, go to exposethetpp.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future. He controls the present now, controls the past. He controls the past now, controls the future. He controls the present now. Now testify.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Interesting story out of Texas. And you gotta love the craziness that comes out of places like Texas and Florida. But evidently you gotta love this. At least the Texas House of Representatives knows their constituency. With all of the increase in people carrying guns around the Texas General Assembly, you've got the House of Representatives there who has approved a rule that would allow for them to install panic buttons. And give the representatives the power to be able to say someone's hostile and have them removed. See, this is what happens when you allow crazy to get too far, because now it becomes very subjective. You've raised your voice to me. I'm sorry. You are being hostile. You have to leave. And that's how we end and break down democracy. We've allowed the crazy people to make their threats and carry their guns and shoot up board meetings. And now I'm telling you, this is where we're heading. I'm telling you, this is where we're going. We're moving towards an era in the coming years of just raising your voice is going to be enough to get you expelled from your democracy. And they're going to hope that you go crazy off the end so we can lock you up. I'm telling you, it's coming. Interesting story, an interesting interview with the Pope, which I got to be honest with you. The more I read about Pope Francis, the more I'm inclined to go, I may end up, I may up being a Catholic again before you know it. He was on his way to the Philippines, and they conducted this interview, and he was asked about the French shooting. And, he made a very interesting analogy, one kind of that I've made in the past. He was talking about, one of the guy who sets up all of his trips, this Dr. Gaspari. And the Pope says, if my good friend, Dr. Gaspari, says a curse word against my mother, he can expect a punch. He says, it's normal. It's normal. You cannot provoke. You cannot insult the faith of others. You cannot make fun of the faith of others. Just like you can't say something about someone's mother. I'm often taken by these people who are, my God's better than your God. My God's bigger than your God. And didn't we have about 400 years of the Crusades over this? And, I kind of look at this stuff as, we've become a society that feels that there are no repercussions. And I talked about this a little yesterday about, reading some of the comments at the bottom of articles where people are just, they're anonymous so they can say the most outrageous, just the most, adversarial, angering garbage and get away with it. And, the Pope said, look, you might not want to provoke. He said that there's, the right to liberty of expression, has a bound. And, he says, look, this right to liberty of expression came with the obligation to speak for the common good. And that to me is really a huge statement. That when you're talking about how to make things better, most of the right-wing speech I hear is very destructive. It's all about how can we tear things down. And it's interesting to me that the people who claim to be producers are the ones who are really the destroyers. Now, evidently, he was headed to the Philippines to meet with survivors of the latest typhoon there, which you've got the government of the Philippines saying, hey, this is an example of global warming. This is another one of those moments where our country's being battered, and there's we didn't do it. We didn't cause it, but there's nothing we can do to stop it. And the Pope said that he believed global warming was mostly man-made, saying that he believed it had been a slapped nature was slapped in the face, is how I think he put it, and that he hopes that the UN climate change conference in Paris this coming November will make a courageous decision to protect God's creation, as he put it. I gotta wonder how some of my really radical right-wing Catholic friends feel about this, because here's a guy who's saying we need to talk to others with respect. We need to conserve our environment. We need not to waste. We need not to exploit nature and exploit what we have. I don't know how they take that. And the question I start coming back to is, will we see either a mass exodus from the Catholic Church of people going, I want to consume and I don't care, I'm going to aerosol cans and big SUVs. But it made me go back to being a kid in the Catholic Church, where they used to talk about social justice and helping the poor and the sick and the imprisoned, helping the downtrodden. I mean, as a nation, we used to think like that, didn't we? I mean, a little bit, when we were still connected to each other, before we had, iPhones and I this and I that and I. See, I always thought they should have been me phones, but I guess I's easier. But he was in the Philippines, where he got off the plane. He got off the plane and talked to two kids, a 9 and 10-year-old, and one of the kids had probably one of the most heart-wrenching statements. He goes, while I was hugging the Pope, he said, I prayed that he could help more children, not only the two of us, which I thought was really one of those statements that you hear from kids about helping all, not just me. And maybe there's a lesson in there for all of us. Just a thought. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Make sure it's there. And the best thing about the Rick Smith Show app, it's free. Just go to Google Play or your iTunes store, and it should be right there, easily accessible. Any questions, comments, anything on your mind, you can always email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I do enjoy the crazy ones. So if you're crazy, please, I enjoy engaging in the crazy conversation, which I'm sure I will get a couple over the Pope issue here. Always do. Whenever you talk about religion, and look, I do not talk ill of other people's religions. I do question some motives of those. But I do, again, appreciate the emails. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The Teamsters Union and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York filed an application with Chief Judge Loretta Preska requesting that she approve an agreement to end decades of government oversight over the Teamsters Union.
International Brotherhood of Teamsters President Jim Hoffa. Hoffa says this agreement with the government signals success in efforts to drive organized crime corruption from the Teamsters, and he expects the judge to approve it.
We anticipate that she'll approve that agreement. This is a historic day for our Teamsters. After decades of hard work and millions of dollars spent, we can finally say that corrupt elements have been driven from the Teamsters.
On the Kaiser Permanente strike line in West Los Angeles, National Union of Healthcare Workers striker Elizabeth White says that patients' needs and adequate staff to meet those needs is what this strike is all about. For the working class communities she serves, the top concerns are youth safety, mental health services, and community violence.
A patient who has Kaiser Permanente as their health insurance plan, when their family is in need, when their family faces mental, emotional problems or violence in their community, they expect the product that they purchased to have all the components in the box. They expect their health plan to provide them with an appropriate intervention based on behavioral sciences.
Instead, White says Kaiser is squeezing services by failing to provide adequate professional staffing to meet the community needs. White says an upcoming two-day strike by 18,000 union nurses is centered on the same staffing issue at Kaiser.
We very much share the same philosophy with the nurses in the sense that we think Kaiser is really not giving safe staffing and nurses protection under the Ebola crisis.
Over 100 people packed a hearing and another room at the Wisconsin State Capitol Wednesday to weigh in on the Assembly's School Accountability Bill. WIN's Zoe Sullivan reports.
The controversial bill was presented last week by Education Committee Chair Representative Teasfeld. The bill lays out a mandate for public schools that receive a failing grade for 4 consecutive years to convert to a charter format. Milwaukee's Democratic Representative Christine Sinicki took the chair to task for the bill's potentially devastating impact on the state's education budget. Rachel Schleuder has been teaching in the Milwaukee public school system for 25 years. While she agrees that accountability is essential, she says the legislature has to do a better job.
This is very important to our children. We have so many children in MPS that need that community-based school. And we've seen so many voucher schools up and leave in the middle of the night. We had a high school that actually left around 200 students without a school. Their parents had to look for an alternative right after vacation.
Schleuder also described the way that broader social problems such as poverty, violence, and inequality affect children's performance in school, issues that bills such as the one on the table do not address.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So yesterday we talked a little bit about this new report out, this new paper out by a Baylor University professor and a University of Arkansas professor. I would say not liberal bastions, but these two professors said, look, we looked at that data from the 1980s all the way up to the mid 2000s, and what we found were union workers were happier than their non-union counterparts. And as I said yesterday, of course, I mean, when you have a bit of empowerment on the job, you have a voice and some security along with a decent wage. How can you not be happy about that? But we're going to talk a little bit about that with Steve Kreisberg. He's AFSCME's Director of Research and Collective Bargaining Rights. To talk a little bit about it. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, I mean, I look at this and it seems common sense to me. I mean, like a lot of these reports that you read, you go, why would you do that? I already knew it. But it seems fairly common sense to me.
Yeah, it is common sense. I mean, when people think about the labor movement, don't they think about a good, warm, fuzzy golden retriever that makes you happy? That's kind of us. But
Is that the new branding? Is that where we're going with the new branding?
I hope not. I hope not. This conversation's already gone to the dogs. But I think more seriously, I think you hit it on the head, Rick. This is really a lot about people feeling empowerment, a sense of participation, and really a sense of connection with others on the job. I mean, we spend a lot of our working life on the job, a lot of our waking hours, I really should say, on the job. And it becomes to some people like a second family. And to feel a connection with your brothers and sisters that you work with is an important aspect of this that shouldn't be underestimated.
I'm right there with you. I think about all the years. I was a Teamster for more than 20 years. And, in those years, I think about the people that I worked with and the good times, some of the bad times. And when someone was sick, someone fell in hard times, there was always somebody there to say, hey, let's do something to make it better for them. We always took up collections or flower funds or, things, because as you pointed out, it was like a family.
Yeah, and it's not like non-union workplaces don't have some of that, but there's an institutional nature to it with the union. And there's a value system in a lot of union workplaces that we do take care of one another, and you have an organization that stands for that. And in fact, the right wing spends a lot of time and effort trying to disabuse people of that idea, trying to convince people that the union is somehow some kind of foreign entity that is really not a part of the workplace and not really of the worker. And I think what this study shows is that the workers who are actually part of unions don't believe that. They really do see the connection to each other, and the union helps provide that.
Right. I've said for years, one of the things the corporate right wing wants to do is divorce workers from their unions and citizens from their government. It's the exact same thing. It's basically just divide and conquer. If we can get people thinking, hooray for me and the hell with everybody else, it's a lot easier to pick hooray for me off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what we see very often among some of these guys is whether it be the Right to Work Committee and, people like Chris Christie and Scott Walker, these are very angry people. They're not very happy people. And so what we would say to those folks is they ought to become a part of the union.
There you go.
Because they need an attitude adjustment. You don't see that kind of anger among most folks, but we do see it among some of these far-right politicians. I think, the Tea Party was built on anger. And I think some of this, and the politicians that play into it, is based on trying to create an alienation of people from one another. And the union counters that by providing a connection, and I think that provides a feeling of satisfaction.
Yeah, I know, but this has been like a 30, 40-year endeavor. I mean, you go back to the era of the Reaganomics. It's, me, mine, greed is good. Everything to break people up and tear them apart, as where, in my experience, my union experiences was how do we do things collectively to make sure everyone does better?
Right. I mean, it's the old rising tide should lift all of the boats. And I think what we've seen, I mean, just to take the conversation a bit broader, what we've seen over the last 3 decades is, the tide is coming up, but some of us are moored so tightly to the dock that we're going underwater.
Right.
While others are rising up very well, because we're no longer, the social contract in our society is broken down. And we no longer believe in sharing the wealth with everybody. And I don't mean in the socialistic sense. I mean the sense that everybody's contributing, but the power relationships in our society have gotten so distorted that the wealthy get wealthier, and they've consolidated their economic power, as we've seen from the statistics, and they're well on their way to consolidating their political power.
Right.
And I think from our perspective as the union, we still work together. We still have that sense of connection. We still have that sense of empowerment when we are together.
Yeah, I look at this report though, and immediately when you see the word happy, I think of Thomas Jefferson, who in writing the Constitution and in writing the Declaration of Independence, the idea of the happiness was something back then that they deliberately thought of, and why we don't have life, liberty, the pursuit of private property, which is what it was originally going to be. We have happiness.
We absolutely do. I think, it's really, it is an inalienable right of people to try to be happy. And I think that's what it's all about. People take happiness and they take comfort in their families. They take it in their friends. And what we're finding is they take comfort and happiness through their unions. And that's a very important aspect of this. And I think if we can build some stronger labor organizations and we can have a resurgence of the labor movement, it's not going to bring happiness to everyone. I mean, I'm not trying to be silly about it, but it plays an important role. It plays an important role in the satisfaction of people with their society. People have more material goods now than they've ever had before. But I don't think most people would claim that those of us here in the 21st century are much happier than people were in the 1950s and 1960s. We just have different things. And maybe different things make us happy.
And
But
different
we're certainly,
priorities.
as a whole, not happier despite our material possessions.
Good point. But I look at what the report said, and it said, workers have greater satisfaction with one's experience while working, feeling greater job security, being afforded numerous opportunities for social interaction and integration, and enhancing the participatory benefits associated with more engaged democratic citizenship. And one of the things I've always said is, one of the things that the right wing always wants to do is break up unions for, I think, the last one, more importantly, this idea of being a part of a democratic process, having some empowerment, not just on the job, but also in how our government is run and how we're governed.
Well, that's absolutely right. I think there's an effort to make people feel like this is a fruitless exercise. That it's not worthwhile to take part in civic life, and it's not worthwhile to take part in your work life through a union. That nothing can be done. I think there's a defeatism that sometimes underlies some of our political messages, and it could be very disempowering. And I think when people, one of the things that makes people unhappy, and this is in the same study, was referenced in the same study, is when people are unemployed, because a lot of times your self-worth and your happiness is tied to your ability to contribute,
right,
and to be an active contributor. But when you're told that you can't contribute to society's civic life and you can't contribute to decision making, that has a tremendously negative effect on your psyche, and I think it does undermine your happiness. So the union being a platform for people to give voice to their own aspirations, give voice to their dissatisfactions, can help resolve those dissatisfactions and help them realize their aspirations.
Yeah, and to me, another one of those opportunities for engagement. I mean, a lot of people they learn political into their political engagement through being engaged at the local level, on the job, voting for stewards, voting for representatives, being part of that. I've always said unions are pure Athenian type democracy because I know as a Teamster we voted on everything. And, it's this idea of being part of a democratic process that you replicate on larger and larger scales.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Rick. And the interesting thing about that, when you say that, I'm reminded of something that President George W. Bush had said. And he was talking about this in a completely different context. He was talking about this in the aftermath of September 11th, the attacks. And he said and we all know who he was talking about, he said, they hate us for our freedoms. And I think to a certain degree, the right wing hates us for our democracy. They don't believe workers ought to be empowered. And they're looking to deny us that very right. So I think, our union is facing unprecedented attacks like never before. Yep. There's right now a case that they've brought before, or they're seeking to bring before the Supreme Court, the effect of which is to try to deny public sector workers a voice on the job. And we all know where this is headed. I mean, the next step is to try to say, well, we don't really need unions any longer in the United States of America. This is a 21st century economy, and they're unnecessary. Meanwhile, the one thing we do know is as unions have declined, the ability of the middle class and workers to increase their standard of living has also declined.
Well, I would argue the ability of the middle class to exist has declined, not even maintain their standard of living. We've seen this great compression of the middle class, in my view, to almost non-existence.
Well, I think you're right. I really can't. I can't challenge that. I think and the statistics bear you out. People are struggling like never before, and I think the politicians who have created this then try to convince people that the reason why you're suffering is because your taxes are too high. But the evidence would tell us that the tax load in the United States of America at this point in our life is lower than it's been at any time since 1948.
Wow.
So we're certainly not paying more taxes than ever before. In fact, we're paying less. So it's not taxes that are leading to the erosion of the middle class way of living. It's the very fact of the matter is that jobs don't pay what they used to. We've lost a good set of jobs that were union jobs, and the jobs we've replaced them with don't necessarily demand less of people. They're just going to get less in terms of compensation.
Absolutely. I think the recent numbers bear that out. I mean, the jobs numbers were at 5.6% unemployment, yet wages actually went down in the month of December. So as the job market tightens, wages actually went down, which is another one of those interesting moments where I say, look, you need to have organized labor to fight organized capital, or at least be able to add some counterbalance to be able to sit at the same table and negotiate.
Well, that's right. That's right. We have tremendous numbers of people now who are discouraged and have dropped out of the workforce. So our labor force participation rates are low, and until we can get that number up, we're looking at the wrong number by looking at unemployment. Until we get more people willing to come into the workplace and because they see jobs are attractive and are paying, and you can get treated with dignity on that job. And not be treated in an inhumane fashion and be jerked around on your scheduling and be denied the ability to miss a day of work to care for a loved one who might be ill, or even care for yourself if you're ill, until we can kind of change that and get out of this mindset that we've somehow gotten into, that work is just like it was in 1917. I think we're going to have very difficult time as an economy.
Yeah. So
Of course, the unions are the ones who've changed that, and we need a resurgence if we're going to change our economy.
I'm with you. So the question I have then is, how do we bring happiness? How does labor bring happiness to the rest of the workforce? Because I got to be honest, most of the people I talk to, they're on this treadmill. They got their head down. That I'm just happy to have a job, as miserable it is, as I haven't gotten a raise in a decade. How do we bring that happiness around?
Well, short of getting everybody a golden retriever, I think that the best thing we could probably do is speak up for ourselves. I think at a certain level, the American population, workers, really have an obligation to start speaking up for themselves. They have an obligation. We all have an obligation to do what we think is right and we think is necessary, and that includes banding together to join a union. Because I think most folks, when given that opportunity in an unpressured environment where they're not coerced and threatened, which the law says they should not be coerced and threatened. So when people are given those kinds of conditions, they're choosing a union, because I think there's an understanding that, united, the workers do have greater power and ability to address their concerns. So our union understands this. And I think many unions throughout the labor movement understand this. And I think there's a rekindling of the spirit of organizing. We're undertaking a program within ASME to try to reach out to every last single one of our members, and those that aren't members but are in our bargaining units but have chosen not to join, and have a conversation with them. Talk to them about their hopes and dreams. Talk to them about what they see of themselves and what they would like to see of their union. And there's no better way to do that than that to accomplish the things that I'm talking about. It's really about getting our fair share of the pie, about people being able to look at their kids and know that their kids could have a better life than they had, as opposed to what people are looking at now, and they wonder if their kids will even have as much as they've had themselves, and they're struggling themselves.
No, I feel it as well. I mean, my grandfather was, did organizing back years and years ago. And, I think they're the greatest generation that came back from World War II and built the middle class by organizing, that they looked at their kids and knew that their kids and their grandkids were going to do better off than they are. And I think of that in looking at my children, who, I got to be honest, I'm scared to death for.
Well, you think about that World War II generation and the post-World War I generation that kind of created the labor movement, with the Buick sit-downs and some of the other things that, in history that kind of created the labor movement. And the thing that you could say about those folks is they felt they had something in common with the man or woman who worked next to them. They felt that connection. And maybe that connection was built in the crucible of warfare, of World War I and World War II. Maybe it was just a different time and a different social consciousness. But people felt a greater connection to one another. And what the study says is people are happier when they feel that connection.
Yep.
Unions provide that connection. So we need to take that and build upon it. So you can be, I've been a little bit lighthearted with some of my comments about the happiness study, but there's really a very important kernel in the study, which is that people do have this desire to be connected, and we provide a tremendous outlet for that and an ability to do that is unmatched. And we've got to do more of it, and the burden is on the unions and the burden's on the workers to join together and recognize the value of each other. And I think we can get there.
Yeah, and I think the idea, what the right wing of this country, I think, has done masterfully, is they've made it the unions instead of our unions, the workers' unions. And I always like to say it's our union. as opposed to the, or our government as opposed to the government, because that's to me, it's what the right wing wants us, divorced from that, from our entities. The website, afsme.org, AFSCME.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Steve Kreisberg's name. It'll take you right there. Steve, really great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Hey, you're welcome, Rick. And by the way, if you go to that AFSCME site, AFSCME.org, go /happy. Your folks should do that. There's a great video on there that we just put up. So it's AFSCME.org /happy, and you'll see a great video.
Yep, we tweeted that out just a second ago. So, Steve, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
All right, Rick, good luck to you.
Great talking to you. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
We're in a fight to bring the middle class back, and we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. This date marked one of the strangest industrial disasters in U.S. history. It started out as a cold, wintry day in Boston, when the weather suddenly shifted, and temperatures began to dramatically rise. A 50-foot storage container containing nearly 2.5 million gallons of molasses began to make strange noises. At the time, molasses was popular as a sweetener and also was used in the production of alcoholic beverages. However, the nation was on the brink of prohibition. This decision proved fatal. The poorly constructed tank ruptured, sending a 25-foot wall of molasses into the streets. The sticky tidal wave of molasses filled the streets, knocking over buildings, killing 21 people and injuring 150 more. A fireman was among those who lost their lives. The property damage totaled more than $1 million. Cleanup was a long, messy affair. The Boston Harbor remained a tinged brown with molasses into the summer months. The owners of the tank blamed the disaster on an explosion by anarchists. After many years of litigation, the courts found the owners had not tested the tank properly in their rush to beat prohibition. In a class action lawsuit, the company was held responsible for manslaughter. They had to pay more than $600,000 in damages. And today, on hot summer days, nearly 100 years later, Bostonians in the area claim they can still smell the molasses rising from the streets. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing some White House history and how the Oval Office developed into what it is today. Teddy Roosevelt's wife, Edith, wanted all the second floor of the White House to be a private residence, which resulted in the construction of the West Wing and ended the use of the Oval Yellow Room as an office. Then President Taft built the official Oval Office on the south side of the wing. Franklin Roosevelt later created today's modern Oval Office by enlarging it and moving it to the southeast corner of the West Wing. But after all that, what's the big deal about the office being oval anyway? The only one of our U.S. presidents that never occupied the White House was our first, George Washington. But he may have had the biggest influence on the president's office being oval-shaped. Join us again next time for George and an Architect. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Minimum wage.
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Boy, if that's not the truth. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You think about that, and, it's just that minimum wage issue, which I still have no idea how someone lives on minimum wage. I just don't. I don't get it. And you want to go to that happiness place, the idea that labor unions bring people some measure of happiness. I think wages being one of those, the ability to make sure that you can put food on the table, a roof over your head, I think that's got to give you some self-respect, some dignity, some pride, and thus, I think, some happiness, some measure of, hey, I had a good day. Some measure of, hey, it's going to be okay. The fact that you've got job security, you don't have to worry tomorrow you're going to get canned for, you wore the wrong color shoes, which has happened. Or you and 3 other coworkers wore the same orange jumpsuit. It's nuts, just nuts. And I look at this story over at the York Daily Record today, I believe it is, the York Daily Record, talking about the minimum wage, which I got to be honest, the guy did a fairly middle-of-the-road piece, which I generally expect to be a hit piece. But they point out that, you've got 29 other states here in the nation who have raised the minimum wage above the federal mandated $7.25. They gave both sides, said, the incoming governor, Tom Wolf, says, look, if we raise the minimum wage up, it will increase jobs. It's going to create jobs by putting money in people's pockets, which I agree with. He points out that, if they raise the $10.10 an hour, which is what the governor wants, you would see, and then index it to the inflation after that. He said raises would raise for 20% of the people here in the Commonwealth. And they claim would lead to about 5,000 new jobs because of that consumption. And I agree with that. Now, on the other side of it, like I said, he gave the middle of the road. The Chamber of Commerce says, not going to happen. It's going to cost us jobs because we don't want to share. And honestly, that's what it was. I mean, if you look at all of the times that the minimum wage has been raised over the last 20 years, the Chamber of Commerce and the corporate class has said, it's going to kill job killer. It hasn't happened, but that doesn't stop them from crying wolf. And at some point, I'm hoping the actual wolf, our new governor, will be the one saying, hey, it's going to create jobs. Now, of course, you got to get the right-wing spin from the Tea Party think tank of the Commonwealth Foundation. They claim, if you raise that minimum wage, those stupid people, those poorly educated people, they're not going to be able to find jobs. And it's going to be a huge barrier. And I'm going, wait a second. The minimum wage is supposed to be for people at the bottom, people with limited skills. Aren't we, as a society, don't we value some measure of work? By saying, hey, maybe here's an idea. Give people dignity, give them the ability to make a living so that they can support themselves, so that they don't end up homeless. Now, what the Commonwealth Foundation and their ilk will tell you is that they believe there should be no minimum wage. If you're desperate enough to work for $1 an hour, that's what it should be. Seriously, this is what it is. But the thing that I liked best about the article, or I should say the thing that I found most interesting about the article, is they quoted Seth Grove, the state representative from down in that area, the Dover Township area. Good Republican, good Republican line. He's against raising the minimum wage. And the reason he's against raising the minimum wage is he says the market can work for itself. And through hard work, dedication, and perseverance, an individual can move themselves out of a minimum wage job. That sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds like, yes, you can do it. Problem is, I don't know if you've gone to any fast food restaurants. I don't know if you've looked at the retail industry where people are actually working. And they come to work every day and they bust their behinds. And I've talked to people who've worked in the fast food joints for years, not just a couple of weeks here and there, but for years. And they still have not gotten a minimum wage increase. And they're still there, right at minimum wage. They work hard. They're dedicated. They persevere. They walk miles in the cold to get to a job. I'm just kind of lost with this sentiment that, well, they just have to work harder. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. But it is what I would expect from our friends on the Republican side of the aisle. Now, Kevin Schreiber, the state representative from the York area, the Democrat says it is the right thing to do, not only morally, but economically, which again, like I said, will create jobs and will help the economy. I think it's something we absolutely have to do. I just don't think the Republican majority in both the House and the Senate here in Pennsylvania have the appetite for it. Quick break, right back.
Firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
Who does this new Republican Congress work for? Foreign oil companies or the American people?
Keystone XL pipeline clears Nebraska court hurdle, now moves on to the U.S. Senate.
A new study published in the journal Nature argues that most of the remaining fossil fuel reserves on our planet will need to be left in the ground if we want to have any chance at preventing catastrophic climate change.
Researchers warn Canada's tar sands and Arctic oil must remain in the ground.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop.
Fracking country braces for oil bust. Plus,
we're well underway to our final goal, which is to become fossil-free by 2050.
Denmark breaks the world record for wind energy generation.
All of that wind generation and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Lawmakers have hinted they may revisit some of the requirements because businesses have said the regulations are too expensive and over-regulating.
That's odd. Normally, businesses find regulations too cheap and not restrictive enough. Get to work, lawmakers. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you got a lot to get to today, but before you do, I wanted to welcome aboard Green News Report's newest affiliate partner, the Nowman Radio Show with Dan Nicewander on killradio.org. Hey, Dan, welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. Glad to have you.
Okay, now what do you, Desi, have for us today?
Well, first, due to a quirk in state law, a new ruling by the Nebraska State Supreme Court has effectively upheld a new route for the controversial Keystone XL pipeline from Canada.
This is a weird quirk in Nebraska at the Supreme Court, apparently. Minority rules. 4 out of the 7 Supreme Court justices found the approval process for the Keystone to be unconstitutional, but due to that quirk you're talking about, it requires 5. So even though a majority found it unconstitutional, the pipeline approval process is approved.
The decision clears the way for the federal regulatory process to resume and for President Obama to make a final decision. But Republicans in the Senate aren't waiting for that, introducing new legislation in their new Republican-controlled Senate to bypass the regulatory process and force construction of the controversial pipeline. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, excoriated the legislation.
We have got to cut carbon emissions rather than give a green light for the exploration and the production of some of the dirtiest oil on this planet.
So far, Republicans in Congress do not have the 67 Senate votes needed to overcome a threatened presidential veto.
But they do have about 10 Democrats and 1 independent who are willing to go ahead with this, even though U.S. doesn't really stand to gain. This is just a lobbyist boondoggle. It's amazing to me.
Yep. Meanwhile, a new study finds the tar sands of Canada that would be transported via the pipeline must stay in the ground, and so must all of the oil and gas reserves in the Arctic if the world is to have even a 50-50 chance of avoiding catastrophic global warming. The study in the journal Nature is the first ever to specifically identify exactly which fossil fuel reserves must remain in the ground and where, and that has profound geopolitical and economic implications.
Oh, I'm sure the oil industry and their backers in Congress are now deciding to leave all that oil in the ground after all, based on this new study. Am I right?
Yeah, not so much. Oil prices continue to slide and may be headed as low as $40 a barrel, and that leaves states and towns that rely on the oil industry for revenue to brace for the bust part of the boom and bust cycle as oil and gas companies begin pulling back as oil drilling becomes unprofitable. On NPR, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin hopes it's only temporary.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop in the price of barrel oil, but that's hard to predict. So we're being cautiously optimistic and planning that there might be a potential slump in the economy.
I love these Republican politicians who complain about the price of oil until it actually goes down, and now they're all worried that the price of oil is too low.
Going in the opposite direction is Denmark. Thanks to decades of steady investment, Denmark has broken the world record for wind power generation in 2014, generating 40% of its overall electricity from wind power alone. Denmark's climate minister, Rasmus Petersen, at a recent UN climate event, said it's essential to meeting Denmark's goal of being free of all fossil fuels by 2050.
It's not easy to transform a complex society. It's not easy to find a way in the wilderness. Denmark can arrive at the fossil-free destination by many means and from many directions. And we can do it without jeopardizing the economy.
And they're going to do this by 2050 and get rid of all fossil fuels?
Yep, they are well on their way.
Why can't we do that?
Because we're mired in oil money politics?
Oh, yeah, there's that. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website, please, at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Yes, the mighty winds are blowing across the land and across the sea. It's blowing peace and freedom. It's blowing you and me.
Thank you. The National Labor Relations Act was a New Deal initiative which helped save American capitalism by creating a process which would protect the rights of employees and employers. This was before NAFTA, GATT, and the WTO, which tore legal rights for workers apart, moved millions of jobs out of the U.S. Yes, we stand for the workers at Boeing in Washington State, but we also stand for the workers at Boeing in South Carolina, because they will have no recourse if Boeing wants to move jobs to China. You can't say you want to create jobs here at home while destroying the rights of workers to organize, the right to collective bargaining. These are basic rights in a democratic society. You can't say you want to protect American jobs and not protect American workers. Take away workers' right to free speech, take away workers' right to due process, and you create a new class of slave laborers here in the United States who are helpless to stop the movement of jobs out of America.
The time has come to go and blow. This is a battle cry for the common people.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So next Tuesday, the big day, the inauguration here on the state level, the 20th of January, the inauguration of a new governor, and also, I guess, the State of the Union address coming up. Lots of opportunities to talk about the path forward for Democrats. How do we raise people up, raise the minimum wage, paid sick days, paid family medical leave, the ability to organize and collective bargaining, all things I think are paths forward, as opposed to what we keep seeing from the people on the extreme corporate right, the people who are pursuing attacks on prevailing wage and this idiotic right to work. And I, for a second, I got to go to this. Kentucky, evidently, Kentucky's now gone after, I think it's like 9 counties in Kentucky have passed this idiotic right to work on the county level. And you've got 9 labor unions who have now filed a lawsuit in federal court to stop it. The one that gets me is Fulton County, Kentucky, that has no union members in the county. They have nothing. But they thought this was so important that they had to waste public dollars to pass an ordinance. Kind of sounds just like our Republican friends here. Pursuing idiotic paths. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the inauguration and what we see coming up in the weeks and months that follow. We've asked our good friend Abe Ambrose, legislative director for the Laborers Union, to come talk to us. Abe, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So, I look at this whole right to work thing in Kentucky, and that's the the new front lines on the fight against destroying workers' rights. This Fulton County just blows my mind. They literally have no employers within their borders that are represented by labor unions, yet they've chosen to take their time, their money, their effort, all of this stuff to make sure that no one in the future ever will.
That's right, Rick. It's absolutely preposterous. They're really just grabbing on or picking low-hanging fruit because, like you said, nothing exists there. So they have no opposition. They have nobody raising Cain about the issue, and they have no issue to talk about, period. But they do it anyway because they want to make noise, and they want to intimidate workers, and they want to really attack the working class. They want to weaken it, and they want to make sure that it never rises up again. And those are some of the easiest counties in America to focus on. It's really tragic. It's really sad. And we need to be vocal about this. We need to yell, kick, and scream and let everybody know what's taking place over there. Those are platitudes. Those are statements. They're wrong. I mean, they're bullies. And, we got to call them out on this stuff, Rick, because, if it happens over there, it's going to start trickling over here in Pennsylvania because they have already started with the nonsense. I have seen so many co-sponsorship memos go out during the last 10 days attacking prevailing wage. And today, Representative Ron Marsico from Dauphin County put out a co-sponsorship memo on House Bill 1154, which is about union intimidation. Here we go again. The union guys are thugs. Union guys are bullies. We've got to do something about it. When the stats just don't add up, they have no facts to really cling on to, with the exception of a few isolated incidents, Rick. And this is the way they're going to attack us, man. I mean, they're coming after us hard. They have a 119 to 85 majority in the House. They have a 30 to 20 majority in the Senate. These are real numbers, and our members really need to understand that we are outnumbered, and now is the time more than any time to become vocal and to hold our leaders accountable and let them know that we are watching, and what they're putting out there is absolutely unacceptable.
I'm with you, but we both know you've got that all those weapons of mass destruction in your basement that at any minute you're going to unleash the anger and the fury of your union thuggishness there.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, Rick. I mean, he pulls us all the time.
I can't believe that that's actually in the language.
I know. Exactly.
I mean, it shows how absurd this all is. And the thing that bothers me is, if it was just some idiot on the sidewalk with a cardboard sandwich board, I wouldn't care. But these are actually our tax dollars going into paying this guy to do this.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yep. That's exactly right. And that's the problem. They have the bully pulpit. There are more of them than there are of us. And obviously, elections have consequences. And we have to gear up for 2016 to make sure that we have the very best people in line to challenge these guys, because they're going to try to run roughshod over the next several years. Of course, we've got a Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, who is going to have the veto power. And in the Senate, Rick, they need a 2/3 majority. That means that to override a veto. So that means that 4 Democrats would have to flip. I don't see that happening. But then again, you don't want to go to the veto every single time either. I mean, that's just not something constructive. I'm sure that the governor-elect is not interested in doing anything like that, much like his legislative people. But, we have to be aware that the storm is coming, man. I mean, the clouds are forming. And I see some lightning in the background already. And we have got to be prepared for this hail and this storm that's coming, because they're going to be merciless. They're going to attack prevailing wage. They're going to go after project labor agreements. Rick, they're already starting to talk about the privatization of the state stores in Pennsylvania, reforming public pensions as well. They've got things lined up. We have been told in no uncertain terms that the privatization of the state stores is going to be first on the agenda. This is Speaker Mike Turzai's agenda from Allegheny County, and then public pension reform. And then they're going to take a look at some tax breaks, more tax breaks, and possibly an excise or an extraction tax in the Marcellus Shale. Although I got to tell you, brother, that is being buried right now in favor of attacking working people with the privatization of the state stores and public pensions. It's not going to be pretty.
The question I have is, what's this fetish? What's this fetish that Turzai has with the state stores? I've yet to meet anybody who says, well, yeah, we should have booze on every corner, and we should be putting Jack next to the Tic Tacs on the checkout at the gas station. I'm not seeing it. Where is this fetish coming from? Or is it just that he's obsessed with getting what he hasn't been able to get over the last 4 years?
There's no question that what you just said is absolutely dead on. He has this obsession. He has unfinished business. He wasn't able to get anything accomplished with a Republican governor because they did not see eye to eye. And now he really wants to stick it to the Democrats. With that kind of majority, 119 to 85, he has that ability. I mean, it's going to be really ugly, really ugly. And I got to tell you, Rick, a lot of people gave a lot of money to these Republicans for the simple reason that they wanted to privatize the state stores. When you have the publisher of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette being a cheerleader for the privatization of state stores and admitting publicly that is one of the reasons why he endorsed Governor Tom Corbett, not once but twice, is because of the privatization issue. You've got a problem out there. The folks out west, they think, see, this is what happens, Rick. They equate the privatization of the state stores with being able to walk into your local convenience store and get a 6-pack of beer. I mean,
that ain't it.
That ain't it. That is absolutely not it. And if they knew what was behind all this, they'd try to put a stop to it. You're talking about over 5,100 good-paying family-sustaining wages with health care benefits, with pension benefits. You're talking about a system that is self-sustaining. It gives back over $550 million to the general fund on an annual basis. Why would you want to sell that for a one-time hit of $2.5 billion and put all those good people on the unemployment line? I mean,
well, let me stop you there for a second. Where'd you get that $2.5 billion number? Because last time I checked, because if I remember this whole the last couple of years, they started off, it was like $6 billion they could get, then it was $4 billion, then it was $2 billion, then it was $1.7 billion, then it was down to $1 billion, and then it went from money to just core function of government because we should just get out of it. Where's this $2.5 billion number coming from? Because the last time I checked, it wasn't even $1 billion, and they didn't know.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Rick, because that number is being touted out by the right-wingers, especially Speaker Mike Turzai, who keeps pushing that $2.5 billion out there. I saw a press release as recently as last week on that matter. So I'm glad to hear that those numbers are false, because the bottom line is it's a terrible, terrible idea. Terrible idea because of the economics, because of the jobs. And let's be honest here. If we put liquor on every corner in Pennsylvania, you think those guys are going to be checking IDs? Absolutely not. And in some of the poorest areas in Pennsylvania, the buying of liquor is going to become so rampant, it's going to lead to higher crime rates. It's going to lead to all kinds of social ills. But very few people want to talk about the social component here. They just want to sell it for the sake of privatization and putting union people out of work, because the UFCW has a big fat bullseye on its back as a result of this, and they have been very successful in beating it back. And I am really hoping that we can do this, particularly in the Senate, because my understanding is that there are several bills right now that would modernize the state store system to improve it rather than to abolish it. But the political will is starting to fade, Rick. It's starting to fade, and people are afraid of ideologues like Senator Scott Wagner from York County, who continue on their tirades against unions. And They're afraid of that the money he has in his pocket. And ironically, this is the same guy that wants to starve government, yet don't touch his municipal waste contracts, because that's how he makes his fortune. You know?
Don't touch the golden egg there.
That's right.
But let me be jaded and cynical for a second, because the Pittsburgh Post Gazette is in favor of privatization for, in my view, one reason. They believe it's going to bring them more ad revenue in.
Right.
It's not about social good. It's not about the commons. It's not about we the people. It's about cash in their pockets. I think a lot of people are saying, "Hey, great, let's put liquor stores on every corner so we can have some of those." To use the frame of disaster capitalism, where you have broken families so we can repossess homes, and you have people going to jail so we can feed the private prison industry. It just seems to me that sitting in the jaded and cynical chair, that this is a beautiful measure of disaster capitalism.
That's exactly right, Rick. It's irresponsible. It is hardcore capitalism at its greediest, and I don't believe that anybody truly believes that this is going to be a good idea, but they're going along with it. And the newspapers, like you said, that's an interesting point that you made. You haven't seen many editorials out there in favor of keeping the state store system as it is for that reason. It's very hypocritical. It's like you said, I don't blame you for being jaded on that at all, because that's the hard reality. I mean, they're losing advertising on a daily basis because people prefer to read their newspapers and their news online now, rather than the spreadsheets, or the broadsheets. But at some point we got to call them out too, and we have to write letters to the editor and make sure that they're kept honest as well, because those folks in the editorial boards, they've got agendas just like everybody else, and we've got to hold them accountable and ask them to ask the tough questions. And that's definitely something that should be out there more often. Is that why are newspapers behind this? Because they want to see the revenue that those advertisements will be generating for them.
Yeah, and you made a very other important point as well, because they tried to make it sound like it's the beer, and I know Sheetz has been running a campaign, Free My Beer, trying to get them to do that. It has nothing to do with the beer. Because I think most people are okay with it. I'd like to get a 6-pack at the grocery store, or I think most people are like I am. You don't want it accessible to kids, and I know exactly where liquor is if I need it, and you want people to use it responsibly. And I think having it everywhere, saturating the market, I think that's just bad for society.
That's exactly right. It's very bad for society, and it makes a really poor statement about Pennsylvania if we go in that route. Very poor statement.
Right.
There's no need for it. Again, the jobs component, the selection component, we could talk about all kinds of issues, but the bottom line is it's just bad public policy to not have liquor as closely guarded as it is today.
This is just dumb. And again, it's not about helping. It's about, in my view, more destruction. You see, because we've gone through a couple of issues, not one of them have been increasing the minimum wage. Not one of them has been about creating jobs. To me, it's all about making the ones that we have worse and actually destroying more of them. And I wanted to run a quote by you, because Seth Grove, the Republican from Dover Township down on the southern part of the state, said of the minimum wage and its increase, that he believed that the market could work for itself, and through hard work, dedication, and perseverance, an individual can move themselves out of the minimum wage job, which I guess I'm taking is he's absolutely opposed to raising the minimum wage. I'm curious your thought.
Well,
that's a good thought.
Right out of the Republican playbook here. Okay. What they want to do is every time I talk to a Republican about raising the minimum wage, they cower. They take 2 steps back, and they basically say, "Oh, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get rid of other jobs by raising that, because small businesses will be hurting." That is simply not the case. Raising the minimum wage lifts all boats in the ocean, no question about it, because you have more disposable income. You've got people actually spending more at the grocery store, spending more at the movies, spending more at the car dealership, at the department store where they get their kids' clothing. It just absolutely makes no sense for them to have that kind of fear. But what they do is they demonize people who need money. They demonize middle-class people. They make them out to be the bad guys, because they clearly don't have enough right now, because everything is going to the top 2%, 3%, whatever it is. And those are the guys that make those big, fat campaign contributions. So I would love to see Representative Grove's campaign finance report. In fact, I'd like to see many of those campaign finance reports to see who's actually funneling money to them and where they're getting their information. And too often, Rick, and this is why your listeners are so important, too often those guys don't even read things for themselves. They're shoveled things in front of them by something that starts off with Republican campaign committee, whether that be the House or the Senate, or even RNC talking points, the Republican Governors Association, instead of thinking for themselves. So what they do is they fund all these studies, they fund all these quote unquote think tanks, which are really dumb tanks in my opinion, and they take these sound bites and they whip them up in a shake, and then they drink them, and then they spew them all over the sidewalk so people can see what they're talking about. It's really a crummy way to do things, but you know, if they can't explain something correctly, they'll make you afraid of it. They'll spew all this hatred, and it all goes back to knocking the working guy and gal down a peg, making them the problem, which is absolutely insidious. This is what Ronald Reagan was masterful at doing when he was president. It was pinning the haves versus the have-nots. It's unconscionable. This is not what leaders are supposed to do. They're supposed to lift people up. They're supposed to give them hope and inspiration with their policies, but you know, you don't get that anymore, Rick. You got guys and gals that are in this for themselves, making their pretty penny, getting their per diems, getting their car leases, and it's tragic. But with people like us still around, breathing air and talking about these things, there is still hope, and I'm hopeful that we can instill some of this into the legislature this year. It's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but we do have a Democratic governor with that veto power, and I'm hoping that at least the statements will be made, Rick.
I hope so as well. But one of the things that gets me is, you look at just back in December, the General Assembly got the automatic pay raise.
Yeah,
I don't understand why minimum wage workers can't get an automatic pay raise with
exactly
inflation.
Right.
And one of the things that caught my attention is Russ Diamond, who is now a representative, who made his name going after legislators getting a raise, is actually taking the raise.
Hypocrisy, and that should be a direct mail piece to his voters by his next campaign opponent, whomever that is, and keep hammering and hammering and hammering, because these guys count on people forgetting, and it's our responsibility to keep reminding the voters as to who they are, what they've said in the past, keep holding them accountable, because to me that would be a gold mine of an opportunity in terms of advertising, either in print, radio, television, a direct mail piece, people knocking on doors, reminding them, look what he said, look what he did. This is what he campaigned on, and he did a complete reversal. Yep. I mean, is this the guy you want in office? The answer should be no.
Well,
absolutely
what was interesting was his response when asked about it. He said it's a whole lot of rigmarole, about $100 a month. And I'm going, well, okay. I'm not against you getting an extra $100 a month. I'm personally not against people getting raises. But then don't turn around and deny hardworking people the ability to see an increase in the minimum wage or the ability to collectively bargain so that they can make their lives better. This guy is steadfast against either one of those, but he was happy to enrich himself.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at that $100, Rick. That could mean a lot to a lot of people. That could mean a week's worth of groceries to a family. That can mean medication to a family. That can mean school supplies for kids in a family. So for him to trivialize $100 a month that he's not entitled to at all, in my opinion, I think that he should be ashamed of himself. But here's the problem, Rick. Those guys have no shame whatsoever. Yeah. They're shameless people, and they can get away with it because we don't do enough on our side. And let's do more this year to call them out.
I'm with you. The thing that gets me is he got a raise and he didn't even know where the bathroom is yet.
Exactly.
It's insane. But Abe, I appreciate you taking time for us. One last question for you. And you look at what's your one hope, if you have one, for this governor as he takes the inauguration on Tuesday? What's the one hope you have for him?
The one hope I have is that he surrounds himself with top-notch people who not only understand the technical aspects of governing, but the political ones as well. They're getting into a perilous pond, if you will, where the piranhas will be circling. You need to have capable fishermen to take those piranhas apart. And I'm hoping that he builds a very good, capable staff that will help him get through this.
There you go. Abe, I appreciate you taking time for it. I look forward to having you again often on the program as this year continues along.
You got it, pal. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Abe Amoros, Legislative Director for LIUNA here in the state of Pennsylvania. Again, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can always email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Me and my people are through. Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The Teamsters Union and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York filed an application with Chief Judge Loretta Preska requesting that she approve an agreement to end decades of government oversight over the Teamsters Union.
International Brotherhood of Teamsters President Jim Hoffa. Hoffa says this agreement with the government signals success in efforts to drive organized crime and corruption from the Teamsters, and he expects the judge to approve it.
We anticipate that she'll approve that agreement. This is a historic day for our Teamsters. After decades of hard work and millions of dollars spent, we can finally say that corrupt elements have been driven from the Teamsters.
On the Kaiser Permanente strike line in West Los Angeles, National Union of Healthcare Workers striker Elizabeth White says that patients' needs and adequate staff to meet those needs is what this strike is all about. For the working class communities she serves, the top concerns are youth safety, mental health services, and community violence.
A patient who has Kaiser Permanente as their health insurance plan, when their family is in need, when their family faces mental, emotional problems, or violence in their community, they expect the product that they purchased to have all the components in the box. They expect their health plan to provide them with an appropriate intervention based on behavioral sciences.
Instead, White says Kaiser is squeezing services by failing to provide adequate professional staffing to meet the community needs. White says an upcoming two-day strike by 18,000 union nurses is centered on the same staffing issue at Kaiser.
We very much share the same philosophy with the nurses in the sense that we think Kaiser is really not giving safe staffing and nurses protection under the Ebola crisis.
Over 100 people packed a hearing and another room at the Wisconsin State Capitol Wednesday to weigh in on the Assembly's School Accountability Bill. WIN's Zoe Sullivan reports.
The controversial bill was presented last week by Education Committee Chair Representative Teasfeld. The bill lays out a mandate for public schools that receive a failing grade for 4 consecutive years to convert to a charter format. Milwaukee's Democratic representative, Christine Sinicki, took the chair to task for the bill's potentially devastating impact on the state's education budget. Rachel Schleuder has been teaching in the Milwaukee public school system for 25 years. While she agrees that accountability is essential, she says the legislature has to do a better job.
This is very important to our children. We have so many children in MPS that need that community-based school. And we've seen so many voucher schools up and leave in the middle of the night. We had a high school that actually left around 200 students without a school. Their parents had to look for an alternative right after vacation.
Schleuder also described the way that broader social problems such as poverty, violence, and inequality affect children's performance in school, issues that bills such as the one on the table do not address.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
And they're talking in the shops. They're talking everywhere. Their talking never stops. But all their words of wisdom won't make you go away. The day they close the factory down, I had nothing left to say.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I understand, as we speak right now today, Japan and the U.S. have resumed talks on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, the next round of bilateral negotiations. Countries failed to see any major progress, so you've got the U.S. and Japan now trying to hammer this out. Personally, I'm not fond of the agreement at all, but the first part of this is we've got to stop this quickie mechanism to get it rammed through without any public discussion. And here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked Catherine Johnson. She's a field organizer for Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Catherine, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
So we hear a lot about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, the TPP, and we hear a lot about fast track. Tell me the difference between the two of them.
Absolutely. Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is an agreement between the United States and 11 other countries in Latin America, Asia, and North America. And fast track is the mechanism that the president is trying to use to pass it. So if Congress passes fast track, that would allow the president to sign a trade deal with these 11 countries before Congress even has a chance to see the deal. And then Congress would have 60 days to vote on that agreement with a straight up or down vote. No amendments allowed in either the House or the Senate.
Now, in my lifetime, and I'm 47, I remember George H.W. Bush going, we need fast track. And I remember Bill Clinton and all, pretty much since Bush forward, this has been the mechanism by which we get our trade deals passed through. Is this how we've historically passed trade deals?
Actually, in the last 20 years, there's only been fast track authority in 5 of them. So though some of our largest trade deals were passed with fast track, that's not traditionally how they've been done. There's actually been democratic debate in the past traditionally on these agreements because they're so important.
And I go back to, the pre George H.W. Bush years, and I don't remember this being how we did things in the past. I mean, we were able to do things in public and actually have Congress do their job and work to do what's in the best interest of we, the people, not they, the corporations.
Absolutely. And in addition, before fast track authority, these trade deals were actually about trade. Now, unfortunately, they cover many other policies that special interests want. And this is a way to cut off democratic debate on those policies as well. For example, it could lead to a flood of unsafe food and other products as we open up our markets. In addition, it could lead to higher medicine prices because it has requirements around the rights to medicine and patents. In addition, it would ban buy local and buy American requirements that the United States government has. It would also even impact our financial regulations and force us to weaken many of them. And that's absolutely not something that most Americans want.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's so much to this that I think you could use this to unite both sides of the political extremes, because you got to worry about the loss of sovereignty by you can't pass laws that say that tobacco companies can't advertise to 13-year-old kids. Sorry, that's the law. Won't allow that to happen. And then on the other side, the destruction of labor rights, the destruction of the environment. I think there's enough for everybody.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's not even just the extremes. We have seen the far right. The Tea Party certainly has been opposed to fast track and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. However, on the left, really, it's the majority of the Democratic Party. And in fact, in the House, there are very few Democrats that have been willing to say that they're in favor of fast track or the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've really seen a huge degree of unity that we haven't really seen necessarily in the Democratic Party, that in the House are really against fast track, especially, even though it's a Democratic president who's seeking it.
Yeah, what's frustrating to me is, again, the bad trade deals seem to be be negotiated by Republicans and signed by Democrats. It's frustrating. And the saddest thing to me is I sat 20 feet from President Obama, or actually candidate Obama, when he said, I'm not going to sign those free trade agreements, Colombia, Korea, and Panama, and damned if he didn't. And now here we are, the mother of all of bad free trade agreements. He's pushing through. Do you think he'll bring this up in the State of the Union on Tuesday?
Absolutely. I think he won't just bring it up. I think that it will be the State of the Union will end up being a big push for fast track and for the TPP, unfortunately.
And I would have to think that this has got to be a moment where we start organizing and really push back against this.
Absolutely. I think this is an excellent opportunity to really voice opposition, mass opposition to Fast Track and the TPP. There are several large groups, organizations, as well as unions who will be mounting campaigns the day after the State of the Union address to call our representatives and make sure that they hear from all of us who are opposed to these policies. And so actually there'll be a call-in tool at stopfasttrack.com. Where you can go there and use the tool there to call your representative to make sure that they hear from as many of us as possible. And we're really trying to make it an immediate response. So the day after, the week after the State of the Union, we're trying to get as many calls as possible.
So stopfasttrack.com. We'll make sure we get a link at the ricksmithshow.com and put it out on Facebook and our Twitter account, and so that people get this, because I think this is that moment. This is it. We're at the end of the line here, where engagement right now could mean the difference between something being passed in the middle of the night and us actually knowing what's in this agreement.
Absolutely. And I think that we're likely to see bills introduced in Congress really soon, as soon as the end of this month or next month. And so it's really the time to mobilize, because it's going to be really key to stop Fast Track. That's going to be the key way to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Because again, once Americans get to see what's in the TPP, they're against almost all of it. The majority of both Republicans and Democrats are really not in favor of any of the points of it. So if we can force that debate, then there's a likelihood that we can stop the TPP. So really the next few months will be absolutely critical.
So when we contact our representative, pretty much the comment should be Fast Track, no.
Fast Track, no. TPP, no. But yeah, the most urgent is no to Fast Track, no matter what.
Do we know what's in the agreement? Because as I've been following this, I'm told there are 600 quote unquote trade advisors. We used to know them as corporate lobbyists, but they're trade advisors now. We've given them a new title, who've negotiated this thing in the back room. Which I find interesting, because this president said he was going to be the most transparent president, yet this process has been the most secretive.
Yeah, it really has been a secretive process. And some of what we know about it, we know through leaks. WikiLeaks, for example, revealed some of the negotiations. But really, we only have a very general sense of what's being negotiated. And in fact, Senator Bernie Sanders sent a letter to our U.S. trade representative last week demanding that representatives are able to see what's in these agreements, and in fact said that he would introduce a bill to force that to happen if the trade representative didn't reveal that soon.
Hold on, wait a second, stop. My head's about to explode. He hasn't even seen it. How is he supposed to vote on Fast Track if he doesn't know what's in it?
Well, there's some staffers and some members that have been allowed to see some of the contents of the agreement. They're not allowed to take those papers with them. They're not allowed to reveal that to anybody outside of the negotiations. And so they've had peeks at it, but they don't know the really extent of the negotiations. So yeah, it's a huge leap of faith that Obama's asking for from Congress.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not going there. Especially when I see the comment from former Trade Representative Kirk, who said that if we had to debate this in public, if we had to pass it any other way but Fast Track, it would never pass.
Yeah, that's really clear. Once again, like I said, there's so many policies that will be included or parts of the agreement that will be included that go beyond trade policies, that really, if the American public was allowed to see it and then and our representatives were accountable to us in their voting for it, there's no way that it would pass.
Yeah. So the website again, stopfasttrack.com. What do we do when we get there? You said there's a tool to be able to contact our representatives?
To be able to call. Always the most effective thing is to call your representatives. They need to hear your voice.
Yeah, I also like, just knocking on their door and standing in front of them. That helps too.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. And, there'd be a great opportunity for people to do that, because the week of February 16th, Congress will be on recess. So all of the representatives should be back in their districts. So that'll be a really great time to either set up meetings or even just drop by the offices of the representatives.
No, I've got to assume that there are going to be a number of opportunities and for groups like yours and others to organize larger demonstrations in front of our representatives' offices, correct?
Yes, though they have to be soon. Again, we're really expecting this bill to come out really in the next few weeks, possibly, or at least the next couple of months. And so there'll be lots of opportunities, but only for a few months if we want to stop fast track.
And we're focusing on the House because, as my understanding, the House is key. It's probably going to pass the Senate. The House is the key, right?
Definitely. The House is where we're a lot more likely to defeat it. However, there are votes in the Senate that if there are Democratic leadership, that if they voted for it in the Senate, it would sort of give political cover, or it would make it easier for members of the House to vote for it. So, for example, we're putting a lot of pressure on Senator Wyden to make sure that he doesn't vote for it, since he came out against the last fast track bill.
Now, again, stopfasttrack.com. We're going to get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you get over there. Make sure we contact our representatives. And then Tuesday during the State of the Union address, take some notes so that Wednesday you can call early, call often, write letters, all of that stuff, because this has to be stopped. And it's about stopping fast track right now, correct?
Absolutely.
There you go. Katherine Johnson, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for filling us in, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks so much, Katherine Johnson. She is the field organizer for Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Again, the website, stopfasttrack.com. Go there. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days we're gonna wake up and find a new day. One of these days we wanna wake up and make a new way. One of these days. One of these days.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. This date marked one of the strangest industrial disasters in U.S. history. It started out as a cold, wintry day in Boston, when the weather suddenly shifted, and temperatures began to dramatically rise. A 50-foot storage container containing nearly 2.5 million gallons of molasses began to make strange noises. At the time, molasses was popular as a sweetener and also was used in the production of alcoholic beverages. However, the nation was on the brink of prohibition. This decision proved fatal. The poorly constructed tank ruptured, sending a 25-foot wall of molasses into the streets. The sticky tidal wave of molasses filled the streets, knocking over buildings, killing 21 people and injuring 150 more. A fireman was among those who lost their lives. The property damage totaled more than $1 million. Cleanup was a long, messy affair. The Boston Harbor remained a tinged brown with molasses into the summer months. The owners of the tank blamed the disaster on an explosion by anarchists. After many years of litigation, the courts found the owners had not tested the tank properly in their rush to beat prohibition. In a class action lawsuit, the company was held responsible for manslaughter. They had to pay more than $600,000 in damages. And today, on hot summer days, nearly 100 years later, Bostonians in the area claim they can still smell the molasses rising from the streets. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing some White House history and how the Oval Office developed into what it is today. Teddy Roosevelt's wife, Edith, wanted all the second floor of the White House to be a private residence, which resulted in the construction of the West Wing and ended the use of the Oval Yellow Room as an office. Then President Taft built the official Oval Office on the south side of the wing. Franklin Roosevelt later created today's modern Oval Office by enlarging it and moving it to the southeast corner of the West Wing. But after all that, what's the big deal about the office being oval anyway? The only one of our U.S. presidents that never occupied the White House was our first, George Washington. But he may have had the biggest influence on the president's office being oval-shaped. Join us again next time for George and an Architect. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. A little bit of history today, a little labor history today. Martin Luther King Jr. born on this date back in 1929. Also, CIO miners in the Grass Valley area of California. They went on strike for higher wages, union recognition, and the 8-hour day. Problem was, strike was broken. Company thugs and police, expelled the 400 miners and their families, beat them with clubs and threatened to shoot them in the streets. The year was 1938. Also on this date, just 2 years ago, her name was Margaret Mary Votko. She died at the age of 83 in Homestead, Pennsylvania. What's interesting about Margaret is Margaret, at the age of 83, decided that, hey, I'm a extremely educated professor. She had been an adjunct professor of French and medieval literature at Duquesne University for 25 years. 25 years. No health care, no pension, nothing. Well, she decided it's time to start a union. And for her trouble, she was fired. And 5 months after she was fired from her job, she died, penniless, with no health care. And again, you go back and you think of the world that conservatives want to lead us to. You go back and you think about they want to take us not just back to before the Wagner Act. They want to take us all the way back to the Lochner era, where you're on your own, brother. This whole idea of liberty of contract, where if you're desperate enough, you're hungry enough to work for basically nothing in horrible conditions, so be it. Something seriously wrong with that. Also on this day in a little history, the year was 2009. How many people remember Sully Sullenberger? Remember Sully? Captain Chelsea Burnett Sullenberger III. He was a hero on this day where he took off from, I believe it was LaGuardia, and ended up in the Hudson River. He took off from LaGuardia, ended up by the Hudson River, and he was the guy who, he was able to get it landed. Everyone was safe, and big parades, and Sully's a hero. Sully's a great guy, and he was. I mean, to be honest, very heroic. Evidently, the plane was crippled by birds. Birds hit both engines at once, cut the engines off, and he, basically just a lead balloon at that point, which he was able to, with his experience right into the water there, people were taken safely. When you stopped hearing about Sully, this is one of those things that has always infuriated me. You stopped hearing about Sullenberger when he testified in front of Congress. How many people remember him testifying? He testified how the airline industry was being decimated by these big corporations who were stealing pensions, making conditions unbelievable, the safety records and the maintenance and all of this stuff. He was basically the whistleblower of how bad things had gotten. And that was the end. Zip, gone. No more Captain Sully. But Captain Sullenberger had written a book, Highest Duty, My Search for What Really Matters. And, you go back to that testimony, and I suggest people, take a look at it. because it's still online. You could still see him testifying in front of Congress about, 30 years of wage cuts and the assault on the middle class and how the conditions that he worked under were just, getting worse and worse and worse. And that, he wouldn't even want his own kids to go into the profession. And there's something seriously wrong with that. And sadly, we see that across industry. It's not just in the airline. It's just not Captain Sully. I think it's most people. All of those gains that the greatest generation fought for, all those gains that you got in the 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s, have been under assault since, I would argue, since the Powell memo, since the assault by corporate America on working people. But that's neither here nor there. But interesting bit about Sullenberger, and well worth a couple of minutes to take a look at the testimony. Also on this day, very interesting bit, the first time that the donkey that used for Democrats appeared, it appeared on this day in 1870 in Harper's Weekly. It was drawn by a political illustrator, a guy named Thomas Nast. He entitled it a live jackass kicking a dead lion. And it basically was attacking the Southern newspapers that were mostly Democratic controlled, and also the dead lion, meaning the late Edwin McMaster Stanton, who was President Lincoln's Secretary of War during the end of the Civil War. And it basically just one of those political cartoons of the era that eventually stuck. But originally it was Andrew Jackson, who in the 1828 campaign, his opponents called him, basically a donkey, and he liked it. He took it on, thinking that a donkey is smart and brave and those things, and he wore it as a badge of courage, and it kind of stuck. And on the Republican side, also the same guy Nast, he made another cartoon with the Republican elephant, and it stuck. The Republicans say the elephant is strong and diligent, and they stay the course. I would argue even when it's the wrong course, but pretty interesting stuff. A little bit of quick news. It looks like my hometown has been named the place where the Republicans are going to have their little shindig, their national convention. That's going to kick off on July 18th, and I got to go. We've got to get to the national convention. I cannot wait for the. I cannot wait for the Republican convention because I think it's going to be fun. I mean, you look at the people who have thrown their name in so far. You've got the old retreads of Romney and Bush, which ought to be fun just watching them trying to recreate themselves. And then you throw in some of the other schmucks, the Rubios and the Rand Pauls and the Ted Cruzes and the Scott Walker. I still think Scott Walker going to throw his name into this as well. And maybe, who knows, maybe even we'll see the Huckleberry guy come back. That ought to be fun. And then you throw in the fringe people. If Rubio, Cruz, and Paul aren't bad enough, you throw into the mix Rick Perry and Rick Santorum. Oh boy, I'm still looking for the woman though. Who's going to be Snow White? Back in 2012, you had Michelle Bachmann. She played the Snow White character, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I want to see who Snow White is this time. I'm not quite sure. It should be very, very interesting. Now on the Democratic side, I don't know. I don't see anybody really going to take on Hillary. I just don't. I just think the machine is down that road so far. I don't know if anyone's going to take her on. I don't think Martin O'Malley's going to do it. I don't think Cuomo plays well. It'll be interesting, but I just don't see it. And I don't see Biden. I think Biden's days are done. Biden is a fun guy to watch, and I don't know, not the leader of the free world, but it'll be interesting to see where this all takes us, especially on the Republican side. The insanity, the fun of it. I think sitting in this chair. Now, understand, I don't believe this is good for our democracy at all, but sitting in this chair, it will be interesting to watch just how far the conservatives go. how far the right wing goes, because I don't believe a rational Republican can ever be elected as the party's nominee. I just don't. I think they're for the next generation a fringe national party. Granted, they've gerrymandered enough states to hold enough seats. They've convinced people against their own economic self-interest enough by hating the others that they can control some of those, most of the rural America, because they've actually convinced rural America that they believe in personal responsibility and they believe in hard work. I know it's funny, but they've convinced rural America of that. Granted, they're not that party, but they've convinced them. So it ought to be interesting. I mean, these primaries are always fun, and I'm expecting that this one will be no less entertaining. But again, I don't know if it's actually any good for democracy. Anyway, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break, right back after this.
This is the fate of American dream. I got the time now to glorify now. Before I take a job, come on the floor. I'm just searching for my dignity. This is the fate of American dream. This is the fate of American dream. This is the fate of American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Who does this new Republican Congress work for? Foreign oil companies or the American people?
Keystone XL pipeline clears Nebraska court hurdle, now moves on to the U.S. Senate.
A new study published in the journal Nature argues that most of the remaining fossil fuel reserves on our planet will need to be left in the ground if we want to have any chance at preventing catastrophic climate change.
Researchers warn Canada's tar sands and Arctic oil must remain in the ground.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop.
Fracking country braces for oil bust. Plus,
We're well underway to our final goal, which is to become fossil-free by 2050.
Denmark breaks the world record for wind energy generation.
All of that wind generation and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Lawmakers have hinted they may revisit some of the requirements because businesses have said the regulations are too expensive and over-regulating.
That's odd. Normally, businesses find regulations too cheap and not restrictive enough. Get to work, lawmakers. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you got a lot to get to today, but before you do, I wanted to welcome aboard Green News Report's newest affiliate partner, the Nowman Radio Show with Dan Nicewander on killradio.org. Hey, Dan, welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. Glad to have you.
Okay, now what do you, Desi, have for us today?
Well, first, due to a quirk in state law, a new ruling by the Nebraska State Supreme Court has effectively upheld a new route for the controversial Keystone XL pipeline from Canada.
This is a weird quirk in Nebraska at the Supreme Court, apparently. Minority rules. 4 out of the 7 Supreme Court justices found the approval process for the Keystone to be unconstitutional, but due to that quirk you're talking about, it requires 5. So even though a majority found it unconstitutional, the pipeline approval process is approved.
The decision clears the way for the federal regulatory process to resume and for President Obama to make a final decision. But Republicans in the Senate aren't waiting for that, introducing new legislation in their new Republican-controlled Senate to bypass the regulatory process and force construction of the controversial pipeline. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, excoriated the legislation.
We have got to cut carbon emissions rather than give a green light for the exploration and the production of some of the dirtiest oil on this planet.
So far, Republicans in Congress do not have the 67 Senate votes needed to overcome a threatened presidential veto.
But they do have about 10 Democrats and 1 independent who are willing to go ahead with this, even though U.S. doesn't really stand to gain. This is just a lobbyist boondoggle. It's amazing to me.
Yep. Meanwhile, a new study finds the tar sands of Canada that would be transported via the pipeline must stay in the ground, and so must all of the oil and gas reserves in the Arctic if the world is to have even a 50-50 chance of avoiding catastrophic global warming. The study in the journal Nature is the first ever to specifically identify exactly which fossil fuel reserves must remain in the ground and where, and that has profound geopolitical and economic implications.
Oh, I'm sure the oil industry and their backers in Congress are now deciding to leave all that oil in the ground after all, based on this new study. Am I right?
Yeah, not so much. Oil prices continue to slide and may be headed as low as $40 a barrel, and that leaves states and towns that rely on the oil industry for revenue to brace for the bust part of the boom and bust cycle as oil and gas companies begin pulling back as oil drilling becomes unprofitable. On NPR, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin hopes it's only temporary.
We're hoping that this will be a temporary, short-term drop in the price of barrel oil, but that's hard to predict. So we're being cautiously optimistic and planning that there might be a potential slump in the economy.
I love these Republican politicians who complain about the price of oil until it actually goes down, and now they're all worried that the price of oil is too low.
Going in the opposite direction is Denmark. Thanks to decades of steady investment, Denmark has broken the world record for wind power generation in 2014, generating 40% of its overall electricity from wind power alone. Denmark's climate minister, Rasmus Petersen, at a recent UN climate event, said it's essential to meeting Denmark's goal of being free of all fossil fuels by 2050.
It's not easy to transform a complex society. It's not easy to find a way in the wilderness. Denmark can arrive at the fossil-free destination by many means and from many directions. And we can do it without jeopardizing the economy.
And they're going to do this by 2050 and get rid of all fossil fuels?
Yep, they are well on their way.
Why can't we do that?
Because we're mired in oil money politics?
Oh, yeah, there's that. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website, please, at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Yes, some mighty winds are blowing across the land and across the sea. It's blowing peace and freedom. It's blowing you and me.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Got a quick email during the break asking why the RNC, why they would want to go to Cleveland, since their policies are a big part of the reason the city is in such disarray. And I agree. I mean, everything. You go back to Voinovich as mayor, all of the right-wing ideology of tax breaks for businesses and give the baby in the bathwater and privatization, all of that stuff done in Cleveland. And you wonder why their schools are in a mess. The city's crumbling. The roads are in bad shape. Finally, thanks to Obama and the stimulus, they've replaced a couple of the bridges. The Fulton Avenue Bridge. The last time I took my kids to the zoo, which Cleveland has one of the greatest zoos in the country. But the Fulton Avenue Bridge goes over top of the zoo. They actually built a wooden platform under the bridge, over the walkway of the zoo, so you wouldn't get hit by massive chunks of concrete that were falling off the bridge. Thanks to the stimulus, they replaced that, but only because of that. The tax base is screwed up. Basically, Cleveland lived the conservative ideology. Give everything away and nothing left. So I find it interesting that that's where the RNC is going to hold their shindig. Very interesting. Just like I find it interesting that the Republicans are in Hershey right now, having their little foray. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. now that everyone has left, except Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be here. It's lonely out here, man.
That's what I hear. More than half of them are here in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, and the rest of them, I guess, are in Baltimore.
Yes, they are. That's for the Senate Democrats. They're in Baltimore today where they are huddling with the president. We have GOP lawmakers meeting in Hershey, Pennsylvania as well. And, also pretty interestingly, we have the RNC holding its winter meeting in San Diego, where Mitt Romney is actually in attendance there currently.
So is Mittens coming to Hershey?
I don't think Mitt's coming to Hershey, but Mitt is in San Diego. It's a close drive from La Jolla. And of course, that's in the context of him as a, a laughable, as laughable as it sounds, a serious presidential contender for 2016.
I guess he was able to get his car out of his car elevator.
There we go. All right, that's good.
Which just blows my mind that you would have a car elevator in sand, but that's a whole nother thing.
Or, also a car elevator and still run for president. This was before, he was declaring himself as a 2012 candidate, and there was certainly probably some optic failures there, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, almost as bad as John Kerry wearing the tights and doing the jet skiing while the being swift boated, but that's a whole nother thing. I had someone the other day ask me, why would Romney run again? He was so badly beaten. Why would you run again? I go, because he's an egomaniac. Look, it's about legacy. If you can become president, you're remembered forever. They will. If you lose, nobody remembers you in a couple of years.
No, that's very true. But frankly, at this point, this is really Romney's last chance to have any sort of legacy whatsoever. He's not really beloved by the GOP. He doesn't really have a huge base of supporters who remember him fondly. He's known as sort of that loser. He's somebody who's been quasi vindicated in some Republican minds for foreign policy issues. He essentially named everything under the sun as a threat. And then when some threats came out, he turned out to be right. But, frankly, if he doesn't run again, he's essentially going to just sort of fade away and not really have any future. He doesn't really seem interested in business anymore. There's no one really clamoring to have him be sort of a Republican figure. There's been no talks about a Romney talk fest because that would probably be one of the more boring things imaginable. So, what else does he really have to do besides run for president?
Yeah, I mean, and it's in a huge ego boost. You surround yourself with people who love you and they're cheering your name and chanting your name. It's a huge ego boost. I mean, he's got everything else you could possibly want. That's got to be that next bit of aphrodisiac, if you will.
Yeah, it's a pretty good way to describe it. And it is an aphrodisiac of power, and he's somebody who, of course, is sort of surrounded by a lot of supporters who will essentially tell him whatever they want. That was sort of the issue last time around in his campaign, and it seems to be affecting him again.
No, I mean, it's interesting that the names that are popping out, as we knew, you knew that Christie was probably going to try and move forward. I didn't think Jeb Bush was, but it looks like he's moving toward it. Now Romney, and you throw in then the fringe of Cruz and Paul and Rubio and maybe even Scott Walker out in Wisconsin and, the two Ricks, Santorum and Perry. This is going to be very entertaining.
It is, and already it's just bizarre that we have three establishment candidates essentially running for the nomination. Jeb Bush, Christie, and Romney. All of them essentially have the same kind of cash base. They all have the same sort of big GOP donors who really call the shots at the end of the day. Christie, of course, saw a lot of his luster sort of fade in the past year, but he nevertheless has Wall Street in his backyard. He's been sort of a favorite from the Wall Street crowd for quite some time, and he actually, was able to get them to hold off from donating to Romney last time around solely because he was still interested in the presidential run in mid-2012. So, it's kind of an opposite of what you saw last time around. Last time we saw one establishment candidate and then, a bunch of buffoons trying to knock him down. Right now we see three establishment candidates and only a couple of, crazies who are absolutely intent on running.
Now, I want more buffoons. I'm the only question I have is who's going to be the woman candidate. Michelle Bachmann played the Snow White character last time really well. Who's going to be that one this time? Because you'll easily have seven dwarfs running around trying to out crazy each other. I'm just curious who the woman candidate's going to be.
Yeah, probably Marsha Blackburn.
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah, Marsha Blackburn has been kind of establishing herself as that. Kelly Ayotte is continuously listed as a potential candidate. And you still see some people pretty eager for Condi Rice, even though she seems sort of in the Romney camp of things.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. So let's move along. The president announced that for the executive branch, some sick leave. That true?
Yes, he did. This is sort of the president's sort of way of going about things. He'll try to press for, some huge, kind of progressive changes in the U.S. that'll probably not pass through Congress. Try to lead by example by ordering it at the executive level, and then wait for Congress to act, or more accurately, fail to act. That's what he essentially did last time around with minimum wage. He raised that for executive employees, or for employees working for the federal government, rather. and for the executive branch. And this time he's doing it for sick leave, essentially giving it to new parents, to those with sick relatives, to those who are applying for adoption proceedings, those who are trying to find homes for foster children, and a whole raft of reasons. So this is a plan to give them up to 6 weeks of leave. And it's something that typically we see pretty common in the rest of the developed world, but strangely absent over here in America.
Yeah, well, it's going to be something that I've been calling for a while. I think we should have had paid sick leave for since 1993, but that's just my thought on it. But I look at this stuff, and now that the Republicans have taken control of the House and the Senate, why now? Where were you back in 2009? Where's all this? I saw Van Hollen yesterday came out with a bunch of tax changes and a bunch of tax credits for child care and put some more money into middle class families' pockets by cutting some of the loopholes. Where was that then?
Well, we saw some of it back then. We saw the Lilly Ledbetter Act move forward. We saw healthcare reform, obviously, but there is certainly some frustration that a lot of things that would have been sort of low hanging fruit had it been a Democratic Congress at the time were sort of ignored, perhaps in an effort to try to play along with Republicans without really understanding how crazy they're going to be when it comes to the issues at the end of the day.
I still want the Employee Free Choice Act, but that's not happening. And finally, Cuba. I guess I'm going to be able to go to Cuba soon, huh?
Well, tourism is not going to be listed for a while, it looks like, but the administration did signal today that they're going to be loosening the travel bans as soon as tomorrow. This is essentially going to be for those visiting family, for those going for religious reasons or educational reasons. But we're getting a few more details on that. Americans who travel there are going to be able to bring back $400 with the souvenirs, although just $100 when it comes to cigars and alcohol. Tobacco and alcohol. So a strict limit on the rum and cigars are going to be able to take back. And we're also hearing that they're going to be able to use credit cards and debit cards in Cuba, which is a pretty big change. So
wow, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a sort of a first step to what a lot of people are viewing to be as new normalized relations, although the embargo, of course, is going to take an act of Congress to raise, and in this political environment, it does not look like that's going to be going away.
Yeah, I don't see that. That's going to be an interesting political football. But during during the Christmas holiday, we were down in Florida, and I had met with a number of people while I was down there. And I got mixed reviews on whether they wanted to open this up or not. Some of the people down there are afraid that it's going to open the floodgates, and you'll have tens of thousands of people flood Florida, and then other people are like, hey, I'd like to go home.
Yeah, no, I mean it's something that's certainly not a unified position in the sort of I guess exile community, if that's the right phrase to use. But it's nevertheless being applauded as sort of a realistic step towards having a real foreign policy in terms of the dealings with Cuba.
No. So what are you getting ready for the State of the Union? What's the drinking game this year?
That's a very good question. It's going to be a much more interesting environment, considering it's going to be the first one held with the Republican Congress. So I would in order to, I guess, make your listeners gravely ill, I would just recommend to take a drink every time that Obama proposes something that will not pass through a Republican Congress.
That's a good game. You should be out by the time it's over.
Yep.
There you go. That'll help for the next year. Justin, always great talking with you. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. A week after the attack against the French newspaper Charlie Hebdo, the Yemeni branch of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has taken credit for the attack, though that claim has yet to be verified by Western intelligence. One of the gunmen in the attack told a TV outlet last week that he was supported by al-Qaeda in Yemen, while another attacker seemed to pledge allegiance to the Islamic State. Whatever their true affiliations were, the French military is being ordered to readjust its offensive posture. President Francois Hollande said today that an aircraft carrier was to be positioned closer to the Middle East and could begin assisting in the coalition fight against the Islamic State in Iraq. So far, France has not indicated it will take the fight to al-Qaeda in Yemen. That task has been primarily left to the United States, which has used drones to take out al-Qaeda figures such as Anwar al-Awlaki in 2011. And the United Nations has kicked off a round of Libyan peace talks in Geneva. It's the latest attempt to bring together parliamentarians, local leaders, and rebel figures to avert a wider civil war in the country. Islamist militias control the capital Tripoli, while what's left of the Libyan parliament has fled to the eastern city of Tobruk, where legislators live and work aboard a Greek car ferry that was rented to house them.
Libya is falling really very deeply in chaos.
The Spanish diplomat Bernardino Leon is mediating the UN talks.
Libya is at the heart of a strategic region, and whatever is affecting Libya is affecting the whole region. It's affecting the Mediterranean, it's affecting the Middle East, it's affecting the Sahel, Europe, so it's really a very serious issue.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Look out, America. Here comes the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Dubbed a corporate coup d'etat by Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, it's a grandiose grab for power masked as a trade deal, allowing an unprecedented level of global corporate rule over Americans. Let's take a quick look at what we'll be getting into. The trade hoax. Of the document's 29 chapters, only 5 address tariffs and other actual trade matters. The other 24 consist of various ways to free corporations from any accountability and from any responsibility to the world community's common good. Buy American. TPP dictates that all corporations based in any member nation must be given equal access to the public dollars that any government spends on equipment, food, highway projects, etc. Thus, our own national, state, and local governments would no longer be free to give preference to suppliers of our choice. Buy American and Buy Local programs could be challenged by private corporations. Wall Street rides again. If anyone doubts that this pact is a corporate boondoggle dressed in trade clothes, let them read its shameful financial provisions. Too big to fail laws, ensuring that the cost of a bank's collapse would be borne by investors, not taxpayers. Under TPP, giant global banks could scamper into private tribunals to grab billions of our tax dollars if they have to comply with such laws. Also, our nation's financial regulations would have to be harmonized to comply with TPP's extreme deregulation, recreating the anything-goes Wall Street ethic that crashed the world economy in 2008. A Robin Hood tax on volatile, super high-speed speculators? Nope. TPP specifically lets global banks challenge and kill these laws. This is Jim Hightower saying, to stop the TPP, go to exposethetpp.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Now, it's back to the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Some good news on the healthcare, on the medical bills front, if you will. The report out that says, fewer people today are having trouble paying their medical bills than in the past. And you could look, I mean, the end of it is thanks to Obamacare. According to the Commonwealth Fund, they released their information today. The number of folks has fallen dramatically from 75 million people just in 2012 down to 64 million people today who have had a hard time paying their medical bills over the last 12 months. That's because people are having They've got health care now. They've got insurance now that are helping to cover the bill. I think of the guy that I met in the street on Tuesday. Do you really think he's got health care? He's homeless. Who pays that bill? I'm sure they're going to try and hound him, but good luck on that. Also, for the first time, fewer adults are delaying the cost of health care since it's been tracked since 2003. You had, during the 2000, during the Bush recession, you had that number of people who were holding off on getting care rising. Now we've seen, for the lowest point it's been since they've been tracking these numbers of people who are sick, who have an ailment, who are saying that they're deliberately delaying care because they can't afford it. That's a good thing in my view, because you catch things early, you don't have bigger problems later. I'm a huge fan of preventative care. I'm a huge fan of what Canada does. And I know the right wings, Canada's horrible. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to from Canada who said, I can't try to take my health care away. But I guess it's just a different mindset. They're of the mindset, we're going to have a doctor appointment every couple of months. One guy told me that he gets checkups twice a year. And they're just at the checkups. You go and talk to the doctor, maybe get a blood test, how you feeling? Let me check your blood pressure, all of that stuff. And it's you're in, you're out. It's, it's just like, changing the oil in your car, if you will. And they catch things a lot earlier. So you don't have the big costs of big things. And I think I think that's the way to go, but we're not wired like that. Even myself, I don't go to the doctor until I have to be drugged into the doctor's office. I've got to be near dead for me to go to the doctor, which is interesting because, and yesterday I get a bill from a hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. Evidently someone with my name and my birth date decided to go to a hospital there in Cincinnati, and they had about $10,000 worth of stuff done. And I'm going, that's, I guess, not hard in a hospital to run up a $10,000 tab. What I thought was hard is to get out. But I get this bill and I'm like, I haven't been in Cincinnati in probably 4 or 5 years. And I definitely wasn't there this past September. And, you're going through this process of saying, it's not me. Oddly enough, and I think what's going to save me is I had another doctor appointment that very day I got a hip problem. I had another doctor appointment that very day. So it'll be interesting to see how the insurance companies go. You can't be in two places at once. So it'll be interesting. But $10,000 in charges. And what's interesting is they wouldn't even tell me what I had done or what I was supposed to have had done, which I find just fairly hilarious. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, this whole billing thing and I'm of the mindset, if you're sick, you get the care that you need. And we as a society should be, making sure that everyone has access. Because, I'm stuck on the guy, who's got frostbite on all 10 of his fingers. Do you really think there's going to be follow-up care there? And what does that mean for him and for us as a society? Just one of those really bizarre things that I'm a little frustrated about. Anyway, let's wrap up a couple of emails I got on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement. Randall points out that the TPP also affects internet net neutrality with an impact even on this program. And I've said that before. What they want to do is they have that fast lane so they can buy faster speeds so that they can put programs like this one out of business. That's the intent. And any content that they don't want pushed forward, they're just going to charge a boatload of cash to. And it's going to be just like all of the other media modes of distribution. You got to pay a huge price to get into the market. That's why I think the internet is so important to protect and to keep open. And then again, as Randall points out, another part of the TPP. John sent me an email, says the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement will steal our sovereignty and Wow, spell check. And undo all of our laws. He wrote out. Okay, well, to undo the laws. And again, as I said earlier, it's about sovereignty. I have some friends who believe, there's going to be a one world government. And I'm going, no, don't worry about the one world government. Worry about the one world corporation. I think we're beyond the pale of governments running things. We've got these trade agreements being negotiated by corporate special interests, which is why you've got to go to the website stopfasttrack.com. And you've got to sign up, call in, write letters, do whatever you've got to do. But these trade agreements, look at the last agreements we've had. Can you honestly look at this and say we've created the jobs that we were supposed to? No. We've lost jobs. The deindustrialization of our trade policy is causing a lot of our problems. You look at our pension problems. That has to do with jobs fleeing overseas. Has also to do with all the privatization being rammed down our throats by conservatives. So we've got to be thinking about these things in much larger pictures. This first with this trade agreement. This is bad news. If it's that good for us, we should be debating it in public. Just my thought. Anyway, I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you tuning into the program. If you missed any of it, thericksmithshow.com. Get the app on your smartphone. And I'd love to hear from you, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.